We stand for the true and north, the cities and skylines, the strong and free. For those who value the story and source, the opinion and fact, the context and clarity, to help illuminate the path and potential, the drive and direction. We are the one and only, the Globe and Mail. What shapes your world?
Afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to you, whether you're joining us in person or whether you are virtually signing in for the live stream. I'm David Walmsley. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Globe and Mail, and I'm delighted to be here to welcome you all to Intersect 26. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge we are gathered on the traditional territories of the peoples of Treaty 7. They include the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsunami, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda. The city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation within Alberta. For those of you who are able to, please stand for the national anthem. The resources required to reshape our new world order will always be strained in terms of both the courage and the conviction required. It is actions that inspire. And together, all of us here can make that difference. This is the underpinning reason for Intersect 26, to bring people together, raising the difficult questions and dealing with the facts, however uncomfortable. Together, we can create the solutions. There is today perhaps a cautious optimism. Politicians are finally recognizing the importance of business leadership and hard-earned capital. And now surely it is beyond already the time for shovels to be in the ground and to realize the promise of Canada at speed. Since before Canada was created, the Globe has hosted the national conversation, going all the way back to 1844. But it is not since the 1930s has the geopolitical uncertainties blown such an ill wind. One feels the urgency, the need to resolve, and to allow this great country to meet her potential. This resolve is personified by all of you in the room. Today's event is unapologetically centered around the needs of business and policy. So on behalf of Andrew Saunders, the Globe CEO, and the entire executive team, thank you for participating and being a part of that solution. Welcome to Intersect Calgary. And now it's my pleasure to welcome to the stage Teresa Wu-Pa, Chair of the Canadian Race Relations Foundation. Welcome, Teresa.
Well, thank you, David. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see all of you here. Let me start by telling you a little bit about myself. I study social work right here at the University of Calgary in a city that have long been my home. I have spent 40 years building organizations in it, 7 of them, including Action Dignity, the Asian Heritage Foundation, and the Calgary Chinese Community Service Association. And I also have sat on more than 30 boards and committees, including as the current chair of the Canadian Race-Ration Foundation. And I serve as a school board trustee and as a member of the Legislative Assembly and cabinet minister, the first woman of Asian descent to do both. And I say all of that not to recite a resume, but to make one thing clear. I'm not talking about inclusion as an abstraction. I'm talking about it as someone who has watched the city up close for 50 years. And who knows exactly what it looks like when talent is welcomed in and what it costs when it is shut out. Let me be clear, I love Calgary, and I've been here for over almost 55 years. And it's a city where different backgrounds, industries, and perspectives come together in a way that drives innovation and opportunity. From immigrant entrepreneurs and racialized founders building businesses that serve and reflect the city's diversity, to Indigenous-led and newcomer-led initiatives shaping part of its innovation and social enterprise space. We have one of the highest employment and labor force participation rates amongst major Canadian cities, particularly driven in part by our large immigrant population. About 36% of workers in our city are immigrants. Racialized and particularly East Asian communities in this city are strongly represented in STEM-related education pathways and higher education. But in February of this year, a City of Calgary equity analyst found that racialized Canadians are still disproportionately concentrated in low wage and low salary status, including in the sales, service, and clerical roles. Racism is still surfacing in ways that limit access, belonging, and advancement. And when those barriers persist, they quietly constrain our city's full growth potential by leaving talent and ideas underdeveloped and underutilized. So I want to ask this room one question. The last time you made a growth decision in hire and investment, a market you choose to enter, was all the available talent and innovation actually in the room? Or were some of the most capable, driven people in this city already pushed to the margin before you had a chance to say hello? Because that is the economy that we are running, and it is costing us more than we can afford. Here are the numbers, because this is a room that takes numbers seriously. As of 2024, racialized workers in Canada earn 84.6 cents for every dollar earned by non-racialized Canadians. Racialized women earn 74 cents on the dollar, a $10 an hour gap. Racialized workers are unemployed at a rate double the rate of non-racialized workers. And this is happening during a period when Alberta has labor shortages across almost every sector in its economy, and that would include energy, healthcare, construction, professional services. We are systematically underusing the workforce we have. At the moment, we can least afford it. Alberta has an anti-racism action plan launched in 2022, and 27 of its 28 recommendations had been acted on by early 2025. So governments recognize that equity is necessary infrastructure for a functioning economy. And yet, at the same time, we are watching newcomers, people who pay taxes, feel labor shortages, and build business in this city being framed as the problem. Immigrants must not be scapegoated for challenges rooted in underinvestment and fiscal choices that have nothing to do with them. When we send that signal to a growing share of Alberta's workforce, we pay for it in commitments in retention, in whether the next generation of talent chooses to invest their lives here. The Canadian Race Relations Foundation works at the intersection of communities, institutions, and policy, convening the actors who need to be in the room together, funding anti-racism work across the country through our National Anti-Racism Fund, and demonstrating how we can turn aspiration into action. But evidence is only useful if leaders act on it. So I will close the message. I believe we resonate with the leaders like yourselves. Equity drives growth. Removing the barriers that prevent talents from reaching its potential is not charity. It is the highest return investment Alberta could make right now. If we let the politics of fear narrow who gets to participate in this economy, we'll pay for that in productivity, innovation, and in fulfilling Alberta's potential. Industry leaders like yourself can choose to embed and reinforce equity into your hiring, your procurement, your boards, your investment decisions. That is the ongoing work we must all do, and we must commit and recommit to it right now for the betterment of our province and for our country. Because people and growth are part of the same success story, and we cannot afford to lose out on either. Thank you so very much.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Teresa, very much for those remarks. I'm Mark Ipe. I'm the Alberta Bureau Chief with the Globe and Mail, and I'm going to be moderating a couple of those panels today. The last year, 2026, certainly last year and into this year, have been awfully volatile. I think that's it's no mystery to everybody that what we've been seeing in global markets, in the economy within this country and globally. I think the U.S. trade remains a problem, of course, and remains an issue. I think what we see overseas has affected markets and has affected all of us in a variety of ways, and it's created risk, it's created challenges, but it has also created opportunities. And I think what we're hoping to do today is to talk a little bit about that, to be able to discuss some of those things and have the number of speakers will have discussions around those things. There are huge opportunities emerging for the West and Canada as a whole. And our next speaker will put some of those risks and opportunities into focus. So I'd like to introduce Harry Cullum. He's President and CEO of the CIBC. He took up the role last fall. 48,000 employees in Canada and around the world with the company. He's going to make a few remarks here, and then I'll sit down with him in conversation, and we'll discuss some of these things a little further. So I'd like to welcome Harry to the stage now.
Thank you, Mark, and good afternoon, everyone. It is an honor to join you at the Globe and Mail Intersect event here in Calgary. And on behalf of CIBC, and I see some of my colleagues around the room as well, I'd just like to thank all of the organizers, and I want to thank all of you for being here today for this important dialogue about our nation. Our bank is proud of our history here in Alberta. We were the first Canadian bank to establish an oil and gas division back in 1950. Our team helped to grow the energy industry here in its early days. And also in the early 1950s, our bank handled the financial transactions for the construction of the Trans Mountain Pipeline to help get Canadian oil to Tidewater for export. And today we operate 121 banking centers across Alberta and employ 2,500 people across the province. We have more rural banking centers across Alberta than any of the big five banks. We recognize the importance of clients in major cities, but also, of course, in rural communities. So we're proud to work alongside key industries across the province today to support growth. I'd like to begin by sharing a few comments. It's a quote, actually, with you about our energy sector. Across our country and in key sectors, including energy, we've entered a critical period. We must access new and growing markets. We must improve domestic and continental pipeline capacity to better manage the supply of both oil and gas. And we need to seize the potential of LNG exports to Asia and elsewhere in the world. We need to do the hard work of reorienting ourselves to serve the demand of tomorrow. And we need to get on with it because there are others who are equally determined to get into those markets. Those are not my words. They come from the Honorable Jim Prentice, former Premier of Alberta, former Vice Chair at CIBC, and I remember those comments from Jim. And on a personal note, it's actually difficult to utter those words. We miss them a lot. Those comments are drawn from a speech he gave in BC to an audience back in 2013. So over those 13 years, the discussion around Canada's energy infrastructure has generated more headlines than pipelines. This constrains our ability to export, reduces pricing power, and creates a narrative that Canada does not deliver on big projects. While we should acknowledge the lost opportunity of the last 13 years, I want to add my perspective on this issue. There goes my water, excuse me. Thank God it's not open yet. My role does give me the unique opportunity and privilege to connect with stakeholders globally. In recent months, I've met with industry leaders, team members, and government members, officials across our country and around the world, and I've never seen greater alignment around the need to take urgent action as a nation to further our economic prosperity. We have a significant opportunity in front of us if we act now, and I believe Canadians are ready to do exactly that. Excuse me. In traveling the world, I can tell you that Canada's reputation is very strong. We are seen as a reliable trading partner, a resource-rich nation that treats our national endowments responsibly, and a place where quality of life and a welcoming culture will always be central to our identity. And from my conversations, three themes have emerged. First, there is a case for guarded optimism. While there is disruption in the short to medium term, many businesses want to be optimistic about Canada's future. They see potential for Canada to help lead. Alberta, with its abundant natural resources and skilled workforce, can be at the forefront of this effort. Second, our time is now. In every conversation, the urgency is clear. The actions we take today as a country will define the success we achieve tomorrow. Pace, urgency, and a public-private partnership are critical. And third, all of us need to prove that we can come together to get the major energy and infrastructure projects built on time and on budget. That includes the public sector, the private sector, and Indigenous communities. Our collective ability to execute has never been more important. So all sides of this conversation need to recognize that progress is being made. We've seen federal government investments in the north, as well as new trade opportunities being created globally. We've also seen the establishment of the Major Projects Office to help get big things done for our country. And additionally, we look forward to hearing more details about the development of the Canada Strong Fund. I know here in Alberta, Premier Smith and her team are working hard to expand opportunities for growth. The private sector is coming forward with capital for Canadian businesses, and there's more potential here that's untapped. Over the past 3 years, our bank has supported growth by increasing corporate and commercial lending in Canada by almost $20 billion, and we stand ready to do more. Foundational to making progress on getting major projects initiatives built is attracting capital, which requires a thoughtful approach to taxation. Significant investments in infrastructure will support our future economic prosperity and our resilience as a nation. We should be open to approaches that encourage capital investments in these critical areas. So we need to frame this entire conversation about what our country needs. It's not a case of whether the public sector or private sector needs to do more. We all need to do more through public-private partnership with urgency and pace to achieve our potential. And for too long, capital has flowed outside of our country. This is true of financial capital, but it's also true of human capital. We can't afford to lose either. Young Canadians are just as vital to the future of this nation as the next dollar of investment capital. We risk losing them to global economies with greater potential for developing their future if we don't act now. And for many businesses with North American operations, capital for growth and expansion is flowing south. We should recognize these as threats to our future prosperity. These challenges all share a root cause. Despite our considerable economic potential, we have yet to fully achieve it. But as I mentioned earlier, I would also note that I've never seen Canadians more aligned than we are right now. There is a resolve that is showing up in our conversations and our actions. Our bank believes in the vast potential of our country if we act on our greatest opportunities. We need to stake our rightful claim as a natural resources superpower. It's been 13 years since Jim Prentice made those comments I shared with you earlier. We need to act now so the next 13 years will be the most productive in our history. We are a leading supplier of traditional and alternative forms of energy. Canada's uranium, agriculture, potash, and other resources are all in high demand. Alberta is seen as an agricultural powerhouse in beef, wheat, canola, and many other areas. Given our natural advantages, these are areas where we should be world leaders. We also need to press our advantages in talent and innovation. Canada is home to world-class academic institutions. We have one of the most educated workforces in the world. And we are home to many innovative technology companies. Edmonton and Calgary are driving growth in emerging tech ecosystems around AI, clean tech, healthcare innovation. We must ensure these firms have the tools they need to successfully scale and commercialize. And we need the intellectual property they create to stay in Canada, because we know that that is real value with these technologies. There's never been a better time for Canadian businesses to think globally and take advantage of new trade opportunities. Energy and food security are key issues globally. Alberta is uniquely positioned to play a leadership role in Canada to address these needs. And while our country has global opportunities, we also need to resolve our ongoing trade issues with our largest trading partner. I know our clients on both sides of the border would welcome certainty so that we can move forward and grow the most successful trading relationship in the world. In my discussions with stakeholders in the US, it's clear our trading relationship is deeply valued with potential for growth. Leveraging our many advantages requires a collaborative approach to growth with a bias to action. Our bank is committed to helping clients grow. In addition to providing capital, as I outlined earlier, we are also convening important conversations around the opportunities and challenges that matter most to our clients. This includes hosting next week the Defense and Resilience Summit in Toronto. We'll be hosting together leaders from across the ecosystem with government officials and investors to facilitate growth. This is a time for unity and action. Our bank's history tells a compelling story. Wherever ambitious clients pursue new opportunities, CIBC is there to support them. We are the Bank of Commerce. We always have been, and we always will be. Today, we remain fully committed to enabling growth and prosperity for our clients here in Alberta, across Canada, in the US, and globally. We recognize the value we can bring to clients with our ability to execute for them. We also believe that national resilience starts with strong communities. In the last 5 years alone, CIBC and the CIBC Foundation have committed over $9 million to community organizations across Alberta. No applause. It's what we do, it's who we are, and that's including over $3.2 million to help children under 12 with grants from the CIBC Miracle Day. These initiatives reflect our purpose, helping people, businesses, and communities realize their ambitions. So Canada stands at a pivotal moment where decisive execution is essential. We must set clear goals for major energy and infrastructure projects and establish firm timelines for completion. Speed and certainty of delivery are key, and we can only do that by working together. Governments can help establish a clear path to arrive at decisions. The private sector can drive the business case, and banks can help facilitate capital and expertise. We all have a role to play in securing a prosperous future for our country. Every business, every person, every province. Let's act with urgency, with confidence, and with a renewed sense of ambition, drawing on the advantages that set Canada apart. Thank you.
Thanks, Harry. That was great. I appreciate you spending some time with us. And
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You started the job last fall. Is there something you can point to, sort of highlights for the last, over your first 8 months in the job? What has kind of stood out for you?
Well, I had the privilege of sitting next to the former CEO for many, many years, over a decade. And so I know our country well. I know our clients well. I know our teammates well. Thanks again for joining today, some of our teammates. I've had great discussion over many, many years. And what I can say is that the involvement now amongst our clients, in these uncertain times, but promising times, has never been more engaging. It's a really, really exciting time, I think, to have the privilege of leading our great organization, which, by the way, has been around since 1867, 2 months before Confederation. So the words nation building have been used lately. We've been involved in that for a long time. We helped facilitate the growth of this great confederation over decades and centuries, in fact, now. So, the last 8 months have been fantastic. It's a very interesting time to be leading a storied financial institution to be helpful in our country with our clients and all of our stakeholders.
You used the term nation building, and obviously that is part of what you do, and it's part of what many of the people in this room do. You've talked a lot about that we've sort of reached this point where we need to execute. We need to move fast. We need to move quickly. We need to understand what we're trying to do here, or what people need to understand what we're trying to do, because there needs to be some certainty in the environment. What are the obstacles to that, though? What are the obstacles that you see that need to be removed and eliminated to allow us to take those next steps?
So first thing I'd say is, and I've talked to a lot of clients, I talked to a lot of community leaders, I talked to a lot of government officials, and I would say, from what I can see in my 35 years in this business, the relationship between public and private has never been stronger, and that gives me great hope. But hope's not a strategy, as we know, and so we need to execute. And what we are seeing is ambition at pace to make things happen in this country. When I travel the world, the reputation of Canada is extremely good. There is a wall of foreign investment that I believe is starting to move into Canada, that is ready to move into Canada, that will be moving into Canada in more meaningful ways over time. We have ample financial capital in this country as well that can be deployed in opportunity. And I believe that partnership, that collaboration I spoke to in my speech earlier, is exactly what we're starting to see. So that gives me great hope. Of course, we need to streamline processes. We need to remove regulatory burden. We need to focus on things like interprovincial trade. And I think that is all happening. So it's a promising time. So I would say I would have guarded optimism, because it's going to take a bit of time.
Is there specific things that you can point to that you would say that we should be focusing on right now? Like, obviously there is a multitude of things that need to happen, but is there something that you would point out that needs to happen first, that we need to focus on?
So I think, the urgency around human capital is very much on my mind, and I think on the mind of many others, including government officials. And we all talk a lot about deploying capital to major projects or smaller projects or nation building, and that is starting to happen. It's actually quite exciting. But what I would say is we mustn't neglect our human capital. And if you think about the next generation of talent, that is something I think we need to focus on with great perseverance over the next while, because that human capital is just as valuable as the financial capital.
You've been, obviously, as you've discussed, you've been meeting with leaders within the country, but you've been internationally as well. You've been talking to people. And then obviously within Alberta, I know yesterday you met with some people. You've been meeting with people from Alberta elsewhere as well, I'm sure. But what have you been hearing from the leaders in Alberta? What have you been hearing from them about their perspectives and what they think And how does that differ? How does Alberta differ from the rest of the country from what you've been hearing elsewhere outside the country?
There
outside the
are
province?
pockets of strengths and weakness. Obviously, I've obviously spent a lot of time in Alberta. I was actually born in the prairies, so it's close to home for me to be here. And I've traveled this great country. I've lived all over the country. I've traveled from east to west and all the way up as far north as you can go. So I have a very good feeling and understanding of what's happening. And our bank has 14 million clients in this great country. And we have the great majority of our revenue base is Canadian. So this is where we are focused. And so the feedback that I receive is profound in the sense that it differs by industry, it differs by region. And I would say here in Alberta, it feels as good as it's ever felt from my frequent visits, which is wonderful, but there's so much more that needs to be done. And I think we're on the right trajectory. I hear that optimism amongst C-suite professionals, amongst government officials, amongst many other small and medium-sized enterprises, and also, by the way, in the banking centers I visited today and amongst our teammates. So that great optimism now needs to be followed up with activity and execution here in this wonderful province and across the West. I think there are pockets of weakness in our economy that are being challenged with uncertainties that we all need to lean in and figure out how we can be helpful. As I mentioned before, we've been around a long time as a bank. We've been through good times and difficult times. We plan to be here for our communities, for our teammates, for our clients in good times and difficult times. And right now it's feeling a little better in Alberta, I must say. But again, I'm living in Toronto, so I'm not here every single day, but I talk to our team all the time. And we are invested in this part of the world, and we plan to deploy capital in this part of the world and effort.
So as you've been discussing and meeting with people and talking to people in province and out, I do have to ask this question and raise, the specter of separatism does exist, and it has been been sitting in the background for the last little while. Is that a concern? Is that a concern that you've heard? Is that a concern that has, with the leaders that you've spoken with, is that a concern that people are paying attention to and thinking about?
I think it's got the attention. I think the concept of that has got the attention of people across our great country. And of course it should, because this is a special place. We heard from Teresa earlier speaking about the work she's doing. I think that we are in a position right now where the economy, we expect, will pick up over the next couple of years. The economy helps things across the country. Unemployment's ticked up a little bit, not ideal. So the economy as a whole, in my view, starts to look stronger in 27 and 28. And the execution of the strategy that's put forth by the government and by our great companies across this nation, I think we'll see very strong results or improved results as we move forward through these uncertain times.
In your role and in the bank's role, what is the bank's role in this nation building, in this idea that we are trying to do? So what do you see as your role and as the bank's role in this?
We are privileged to have a very strong financial community, as you know. If you think about the banks, and I'll just talk about the banks because I happen to have the privilege of running CIBC, and it is a great privilege. Our role has been very consistent since 1867. And our job is to help facilitate capital, to help build the economy, to help clients and families and individuals prosper. So help them achieve their ambitions. And that's what we focus on each and every day. So that's providing insight, it's providing expertise, it's providing those execution capabilities that matter most in times like this. And so I think if you think about the industries that matter to this province and this part of the world, our bank, and I'll just speak for our bank, is very well positioned to be very, very helpful. And that's what we're going to be trying to do over the next many, many years. I'm
staring at a giant clock telling me that we're running out of time here, so we don't have very much time. So I think, I think we'll leave it at that. And I thank you very much for spending the time with us. But appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it.
Good job.
Thanks. I'd now like to call up to the stage to make a few remarks Sven List, Senior Vice President of Canadian Corporate Business with the EDC. Sven, welcome to the stage.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to the Globe and Mail for convening this conversation, for bringing it to Calgary, and for the opportunity to share a few words ahead of the next panel. In a few moments, we'll be diving into a conversation about the national drive towards major projects and where there's that creating opportunities across the ecosystem. Canada right now is facing real pressures: geopolitical volatility, supply chain fragility, productivity gaps, and national security considerations. In response, we've seen the government begin to articulate a pan-Canadian approach, bringing private and public players together around a common objective. Getting projects to FID and then completing and commissioning major projects is a central part of that. We know we need more infrastructure. The question, though, is how we can execute at scale, at speed, and foremost with confidence. Historically, when Canada has undertaken nation building at scale, think rail, energy systems, and trade corridors, for example, Western Canada has been central to the delivery. That pattern is re-emerging today, with priority major projects across energy, transportation, power, and industrial supply chains rooted here in Western Canada. At Export Development Canada, we know how important this region is to our nation. In 2025, we supported over 6,000 customers in Western Canada who turned our solutions into $38.5 billion in exports, foreign investment, and trade development activities. In Alberta, more specifically, we supported more than 2,400 customers who accessed our support and facilitated $16.6 billion in business. That support spans energy and natural resources, infrastructure, advanced manufacturing, the agri-food sector, and more, and has supported Canadian companies of all sizes. Still, as we think about the large nation-building projects, there's a lot more to do, and we see a distinct challenge in translating Canadian advantages that have been touched on earlier, such as resources, technical expertise, and credibility as a stable partner, into execution. Energy, in particular, exposes that challenge quite clearly. In public discourse, we have heard about the regulatory challenge, the need for engagement with local communities, as well as the large capital that will be required to build the projects that will move the needle for Canada. As we see it at EDC, accelerating project execution will require the effective alignment of stakeholder engagement, regulatory streamlining, and capital. But importantly, these three elements should not be viewed as independent of each other, but rather codependent on one another. We have a role to play in supporting the build-out of large-scale trade-enabling infrastructure, as well as growing the productive capacity of Canada's industrial base to increase the capacity and certainty for project delivery. We do so by supporting Indigenous communities to be part of projects, strengthening the industrial supply chain, which is a topic that, by the way, I think we need to pay particular attention if we want to bring the massive projects into execution across all sectors. And we will be contributing to the capital needed for the build-out of major projects, and in doing so, crowding in foreign capital that will be provided by institutions such as ourselves, of our international allies, as well as international sponsors, parties that have a long track record of working collaboratively with us internationally and who see our participation in projects in Canada as another clear signal of Canada's commitment to see these developments through to completion. Unlocking progress requires financing, yes, but these projects also require other forms of risk mitigation, such as bonding, guarantees, and insurance. And EDC can help with that as well. We're already active in some of the trade-enabling infrastructure underpinning Canada's major project push from LNG and midstream energy to supplier-side financing and bonding. Projects like Coastal GasLink, Cedar LNG are great examples of what's possible when capital alignment, Indigenous partnership, infrastructure, and export opportunity come together. The same execution logic applies well beyond energy, and I expect that we'll hear a lot more about that from our panelists. Before I hand it over, I'll close with this. Canada cannot afford to stumble on our pursuit to see major projects through. There's a huge window of opportunity, but we all know that open windows don't stay open forever. We need a confident Canada to convert ambition to assets, to reinforce economic security and expand our global relevance. And most importantly, to grow the world's confidence in Canada. Western Canada is on the front line of these ambitions. Some of the projects that will define Canada's next decade are taking shape right here. Thank you.
I had to wait for the cool music in case you guys were bopping out there, and I didn't want to interrupt that. Thank you, Sven, for those remarks. G'day, everybody. My name is Emma Graney. I am the energy reporter at the Globe and Mail, based here in beautiful Calgary. I cover all facets of the sector: oil, gas, renewables, geothermal markets, pipelines. So, as you might imagine, she's been busy of late. And part of that is down to what we are going to discuss right now, which is Canada's push to develop major projects. So given, recent world events, and there are a lot of goals to construct pipelines, ports, and other nation-building projects. And this has really gained new momentum of late. And so I'm going to talk about how best we can meet this momentum. And I'm going to talk about this with an awesome group of panelists who are around, I suppose. First, we have Chris Avery. Oh, here they are. Hi, guys. Hi, team. You're going to love these guys, honestly. We had great prep calls with them. Yeah, run. Come on, Chris. Come on, mate. We've got Chris Avery, President and CEO of Arctic Gateway Group. Welcome, Chris. We have Susanna Pearce, former President and Country Chair of Shell Canada, who I used to harass an awful lot back when you were at Shell, so good to see you again. And we have Joe Dion, the CEO and Director of the Western Indigenous Pipeline Group, or WIPG. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me here on stage and just booking it across when I got through my introductory remarks quicker than I was supposed to. I want to start by asking, so we're all friends here in the room and we all know what each other are about, just a little bit about yourselves, your work and your organisation, just so we can kind of get an idea about where we're all coming from. Chris, let's start with you, mate.
Excellent. Thank you for having me. It's an honour to be here today in Calgary with all of you. My name is Chris Avery. I'm the President and CEO of Arctic Gateway Group. We own and operate the Port of Churchill, the Hudson Bay Railway, and the Churchill Marine Tank Farm. We're a really unique organization in the sense that we're owned by a partnership of 29 First Nations and 12 Northern Manitoba communities. So it's a really unique organization. Some people we talk to in some of the conferences, particularly finance conferences, they say, if an organization like yours didn't exist, we'd be trying to create one like yours. So it's really quite a unique organization. But really the big reason for why we're here today is really the set of infrastructure that we own, the Port of Churchill and the Hudson Bay Railway. Really its purpose is to allow the vast resources we have in Western Canada, in Alberta, in Saskatchewan, and in Manitoba, direct access to global markets in Europe, in Africa, in South America, and Central America. So you sort of think about that, and I've been in the role a little over a year and a half, and I have it as a pre-Trump era and a post-Trump era. In the pre-Trump era, people kind of nodded and said, okay, that's interesting. In the post-Trump era, we really saw what that opportunity, this set of trade-enabling infrastructure that's Indigenous and Northern community owned, has a real opportunity to really support our national goals, to diversify our trade, to help us become an energy superpower, to assert our sovereignty in the North, and also to advance Indigenous economic reconciliation. So we really found ourselves at the forefront and a real opportunity to make a difference.
Cool. Susanna?
You're great. So my most recent role was President Country Sheriff Shell Canada, which I stepped down from about a year ago. And prior to that, I was with LNG Canada for about 8 years. So in fact, Harry, when you were talking about Mr. Prentice, I was actually there when he came to Vancouver to talk about LNG. And it was certainly during a period of time where LNG was not a good word as it is today. But, you know, I guess my opportunity to speak with you today is to really talk a little bit about how to get stuff done in British Columbia, which is always a curiosity for folks in Alberta. And, you know, maybe to also talk about, you know, the potential for Canada, you know, in the global context, because of course, in my recent role with Shell, that's a multinational company. I was previous to Canada in The Hague, where we were previously headquarters. And so I can give a little bit of a perspective if we go there, but clearly aligned with Harry that this really is a great opportunity ahead of Canada. And at the same token, I think we have to be very clear, and I know that Stephen Pullis is speaking a little bit from now about the head and the oven and the feet in the freezer. We can't ignore that, you know, because I think we're doing and feeling pretty good and bullish at this moment in this province. But the freezer component of that, the impacts of higher prices is being felt already. And it is a crisis point in many parts of the world. And I think we need to acknowledge that and consider Canada's role.
Cool. And Joe?
Yeah, it's Joe Dion. I've been around the block a few years. And I go back to the days of Pierre Lougheed, when he was proposing Esso Resources project way back when, and also involved in the build of Fort McMurray with First Nations there, and with the companies that have been involved with Syncrude and other oil companies. So, and prior to that, I was in politics. I was First Nations leader with Alberta First Nations. Fast forward, I ran an oil company for First Nation called Frog Lake First Nation, or Northeast Alberta for the last 20 years. In the last 8 years, I've been involved in this pipeline project that we call TMX, and we've been following that for all these years, and we hope to finally own it in the next while. Obviously, up for discussion with the federal government. But yeah, so it's been a long haul on this story of equity. I always believe that equity participation by First Nations is the key to any major projects in Canada, and it's a way to basically work with First Nations. And of course, I'll elaborate on that for the questions that you'll have. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get stuck into our discussion here. And Chris, I did want to start with you, and you gave us a brief outline there when you were introducing yourself about kind of what Arctic Gateway is about. But it is a really interesting project at play. So can you talk us through some of the major milestones that you've had to date, and also where you're focused on going next?
Okay. Oh, that's great. You know, I talk about the Arctic Gateway Group in the Port of Churchill. The Port of Churchill, despite being almost 100 years old, and the Hudson Bay Railway is similar age, we talk about it. We're really like a startup. This set of infrastructure was a strategic asset for Canada back 100 years ago when agriculture was our primary export to European markets. And then, so that was a strategic asset. So in between, it was ironically sold to American interests who neglected the assets for decades. So it really didn't put any money into it, really took profits out of these assets and didn't reinvest. And then all that sort of accumulated in 2017 when the railway washed out and essentially cut off the port. And cut off all the northern communities, Indigenous and northern communities in Manitoba, and also the central Nunavut region, which is the Inuit communities there, because that's where their supplies came from. So that American company held us hostage, Canada hostage, essentially, not fixing this asset until they were paid to do so. So that's when our ownership group said enough is enough. Let's take this asset back and take back ownership. So that was good foresight, because now fast forward to to today, it's really a strategic asset for us to diversify our trade, as we talked about. So we're really building this back up. The railway is probably in better condition than it's ever been. We're now reinvesting back in the port, and we're talking to a wide variety of private sector companies across the prairies, across Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, about a wide variety of commodities. So we recognize that it won't be agricultural products that will just go through the port in the future. It will be energy product. It will be things like critical minerals and potash that was talked about. It will be energy products, and even things like silica sand that's used for solar panels in our computer screens. And so a wide variety of products that can go through the port. So that's what we're working for. We do need the government to take a leadership position and invest in the Port of Churchill because, this is trade enabling infrastructure. It's kind of the same vision that government had back in the day to build the HBR or build a railway across the country. It's the same thing. Canada needs to take a lead to build the infrastructure, and private sector will follow.
And are you getting a lot of feedback that, yeah, sure, let's go for it, let's do it?
Yeah, I think we're getting a lot of momentum. I'd be lying to you if I think I heard some people sort of say the moment is now, the window is there, but we all know the window closes at some point. So, if I have some sleepless nights, it's because you're always thinking you aren't moving fast enough.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned there about, it was owned by this kind of US group, and now you guys have taken it over. And I did want to ask you as well, when it comes to major projects, what do you think are the benefits for Canada and Indigenous reconciliation when you can get projects like that up and running?
Yeah, it's, the benefits for Canada is us diversifying our trade and really, there has been a rupture in our global trade system. There has been a rupture in our geopolitical environment, and we need to make a change. So status quo isn't an option. So when we go to Europe, when we're there, we have an MOU with the Port of Rotterdam, which is the largest port in the EU, and the MOU with the Port of Antwerp, which is the number 2 port in the EU. We're working with them to develop trade between the EU and Canada. What they tell us is that they're looking for critical minerals. They're looking for energy. They're looking for these essential critical commodities to come from safe and secure countries. They don't want to be reliant on Russia. They don't want to be reliant on China. They want to be reliant on like-minded countries, and Canada comes top of the mind for them. So for us to build this infrastructure is critical, not only for ourselves, for us to grow our economy and grow our resources and our private sector, but also for our neighbors to secure supplies from secure and safe sources. Mm-hmm. So I think that's critical. And then the one unique aspect of our organization is we're not a port authority like Port of Vancouver or Port of Montreal. Mm-hmm. We are owned by the partnership of 29 First Nations and the northern communities. So this is a unique ownership structure for a port and a railway that you don't see anywhere in Canada. So we're at the forefront of that and really seeing what that looks like going forward as we invest in this infrastructure.
Yeah, cool. And I think this gives a good segue over to you, actually, Joe. As you just kind of had a little teaser there that the Western Indigenous Pipeline Group, you want to take equity ownership of Trans Mountain Pipeline System. What benefits do you think there will be to not only to your group, but a lot of different other groups, if that does, or when that does come to pass?
I think there's a lot of benefits. Let me just digress a little bit about Jim Prentice. I worked with Jim Prentice when he was with the bank, and not, in fact, when he was with the minister. When he was a minister, he was a great minister, if I recall right, as when he was served with Stephen Harper, and then of course he went on to private sector and was involved with CIBC and worked with him in this town. I went to his offices in CIBC. He was working with Northern Gateway. I was already starting on TMX at the time, because not TMX, but Kinder Morgan. Kinder Morgan was looking at building the the TMX pipeline, and obviously the story unfolded where they had to sell. They sold to Ottawa. But I read his book, The Triple Crown, and had his wife autograph because he was already gone by the time I was hoping to see him. But the TMX pipeline is, I think, it's the crown jewel of Canada right now. It was built, took a bit of time, cost a bit of money. But
Sure, yeah.
but you know what? It got done. That's the key thing. And the reason for that was First Nations supported it. They of course, some of the folks that I work with from BC fought it tooth and nail. In fact, our chairman, I wish he was here, Chief David Jimmy of Squiala, he fought alongside Tsleil-Waututh to oppose the pipeline. And when he, of course, after 3 Supreme Court decisions, he lost. Then we approached him. He says, "David, would you like to come and join us?" And after a few coaxing, he did. He's our chairman now. He's one of our champions, along with other First Nations, with other BC First Nations on Vancouver Island, and also in Interior, and also in the Lower Mainland. So this, and of course, our quest has always been to acquire it. We have a partnership, of course, as is known publicly, with Pembina. We worked alongside them, and we still do. But there's no now the talk is that Ottawa wants to keep it, so we're fine with that. I mean, if that's what they're going to do, but I think they can't own it without First Nations partnerships. That's a given. And the other is, if there's going to be a third line, and I think the talk is being very favorable, the southern route is being favored. And we don't, of course, we know that would happen. We knew that would happen. We know our folks, our friends in northern BC quite well. And they're not going to allow a hedge, as we all know. Northern Gateway got their lesson on that one. So it's just not going to happen. So we think this is the opportune time for Canada to showcase a project where First Nations can really become part of building this nation. I always believed that First Nations have to be at the helm of any nation building. We were at one time during the fur trade. We helped build this country, and then we got sidelined. And I think that has to come back. That has to come back as First Nations in this country, because at the end of the day, I mean, what is it? 400 and some court wins so far. It's you might say it's the moose in the room. I mean, it's so we need to recognize that and to deal with that and address that once and for all. And I like what Prime Minister is doing. He's saying equity is paramount, and I like the way he's marketing our country around the world. So I could go on. I think I'll stop there for now.
You've only got 17 minutes left, Matt. But I did want to kind of pick up on that point you said about how folks, really fought tooth and nail against TMX. And of course, we've seen failures of other pipeline projects. But, what's your take then on how leadership in Indigenous communities can kind of overcome some of those hurdles that do bog down some major projects, pipelines, but also other projects as well?
Yeah, there is opposition, and there will always be opposition from First Nations on pipelines, and we know these folks quite well. While they understand that these projects are inevitable, they're prepared to work with proponents, to work, especially if they're working with us, through us, as our shareholders, I might say. So there's tons of benefits. I mean, if you imagine when the pipeline first was built in 1964, the nations, the reserve crossings, they were paid $1,250 as a price to cross their land, and that was it. And there've been no benefit since then. So now we're saying, look, you're going to own this pipeline. You're going to have the cash flow from this asset is going to come to your community, not to Kinder Morgan. So I think they see that picture, and that's why I speak for these communities, these First Nations in both Alberta and BC. They see the big picture, and they want in. So I think there's a like I say, and I support what is said by the CIB CEO, Harry, that we got to pull together. There's nothing that will stop us as a country if we can pull together as private sector, as government, and as First Nations. It's our opportunity. It's our opportunity.
And so this is kind of a question, I think, for all of our panelists. And Susanna, if you want to jump in here, and actually, Joe, I know you have feelings and thoughts about this as well. But, Alberta's separatist movement, obviously it's already come up today, but it is the elephant in the investment room. There is this, investors crave certainty. And when you have uncertainty like, oh, will a province leave Canada? That can probably potentially cause some problems. So let me throw to you first, actually, Susanna, on that. I mean, what's your take on how this talk of a potential referendum in the fall on, Alberta leaving Canada, how it does affect the investment community and the investment kind of vibe, for want of a better word?
It's probably the one question I didn't think I would get because I presently live in British Columbia, but that's okay. Again, I think it's well known that any risk creates uncertainty. So adding to the list of risks that need to be managed when you're taking a substantial investment decision, this could be one because the pathway of a vote and then what happens next, does it go to Parliament? What happens in terms of, investments in the province, maybe moving gas perhaps, and oil to another province to Tidewater for export. I think those could be questions that come up. I would think that if I'm voting for, separatism too, that's not a clear pathway either. There's a process there. It does send signals though that there is uncertainty and there's instability in the province, and then that should suggest that there's also political challenges that need to be thought through. But these are risks, and I think if you're an international investor, you're probably looking at those political risks, province-level risks, country-level risks, compared to other country-level risks. And when you measure that with, let's just say, country-level risks in Russia, country-level risks in Qatar, country-level risks in other parts of the world, it goes on the whole scale of risk management.
Right.
So I think it's probably a subject I'm not going to weigh in on the pros and cons, but I would put it up there as a risk. Having said all of that, though, when we really look at the substantial opportunity that can come from Western exports, both natural gas and oil, given what we're currently experiencing, even before then, it just continues to shine a brighter light on the potential for Canada. And I think the history of Canada and its ability to execute and its support for these projects has changed. Not the execution piece, but at least the support vocally for it has changed. But when it comes to the execution, and this is why it's actually so great to be on a panel with both Chris and Joe, my experience has been, and I said this last night at the Energy Council, it is the ground game. Tip O'Neill said in the House of Congress some time ago that all politics is local, and it's a principle that I've left with. And it's not so much about the politics, but it is about getting the community engagement right. It is about citing the project in such a way that you have buy-in from the communities, you're engaging the First Nations right up front. And in British Columbia, of course, the majority are not under treaty. That means that you need to anticipate traditional rights and title and act as partners. And I think that was part of the success that we had with LNG Canada. And so we can have the political support up here, we can have the political support at the Premier's office, but if you don't have the support on the ground, and it gets more complicated the longer the infrastructure linearly, then the challenges will only exacerbate over time. So there's ways of doing it, but it truly is the ground game. And as I said, to your original ask, I think the Alberta separatism is added up onto the scale of the risk register. And if I were an investor, I'd be looking at that and saying, how does that compare with other jurisdictions?
Yeah. And I'm going to get back to you on some of the funding issues here as well and the investment side. But Joe, I know you had some thoughts about this when we chatted before this panel, as someone who kind of knows a lot of Albertans and also kind of based in, I feel like you've got your foot in both provinces here. So what are you seeing when it comes to the impact that this could have on projects such as yours or other major projects in Western Canada?
You know, I have two places. I live in Alberta. I have my farm, my ranch over in northeast Alberta yet, where the pipeline starts basically, and I live at where the pipeline ends in Vancouver. So I understand. I see. I mean, I've watched the pipeline under construction, and I, you know, in many ways, and because of my First Nations in Alberta, I feel with the Treaty 6 First Nations about their stance on separation. You know, we're federalists. We think that Alberta is separating is not in the cards as far as we're concerned. We think it won't happen. The law is there on that issue, like mentioned by Prime Minister Carney. But it's not about. You know, people, you know, the ants about separation. If there was any, you know, people say they've been mistreated by Ottawa. If anybody should talk about separation, it should be us. when we talk about mistreatment by government. And I won't elaborate too much on that, but so we think I think it's wrong-headed. I know the folks who are heading up these groups. You know, in fact, I can almost say they're friends of mine. I haven't talked to them on this at all, but I think it's a major diversion. It could be an impediment to Canada, to the investment community worldwide. I've been to China. I raised money in China when I couldn't raise it in Calgary. I brought Chinese investors to invest in our nation. I think they're folks who are going to be. They're buying a lot of oil right now, so we shouldn't we shouldn't oppose foreign investors like that, because they're going to help us build this country. So, you know, I think separation. I think separatism is it's got to go away. And as one of my friends from Bonneville said to me, Joe, let's have it now. Let's get it over with and let's get it done. Let's settle it once and for all. But I just think that I think it'll be won in the courts, quite honestly. Mm-hmm. And I think I'll stop there.
Okay, so then I want to go back to you on this idea of capital for major projects in Western Canada. I mean, obviously world events are kind of putting energy security at the top of the priority list, but there are kind of competing priorities as well. You know, we've got pipelines versus renewable energy, we've got transitions versus the status quo, we've got electrification or not. So I'm just curious, there's only so much money to go around, right? So what are your views on what gets built and what doesn't, or what potentially could take precedence here?
Yeah, well, from a conventional investment decision, obviously it's going to be on what projects can actually give me a highest rate of return and a certain degree of certainty. And then I think the customer relationship is also very important.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think as we see it right now, in this moment, let me just say the level setting for Canada is we actually do have it all. We do have potential for bountiful renewable resources. We have potential for nuclear resources. We have potential for, obviously, critical minerals and rare earths, not only just the excavation and mining, but all the way through, should we choose, the refining. Mm-hmm. And from the oil and gas perspective, I think the crisis in the Middle East has shone a light on how dependent we continue to be on oil and natural gas. And I think, as we said, or know, that the impacts of this crisis are not necessarily being felt equitably around the world. And I think, as again, the head in the oven and the feet in the freezer in the global south is most impacted by this. And so where we're seeing the potential for displacement or demand destruction, I don't necessarily know that that's going to be in Canada at this minute, but I do think that it's going to be certainly in other parts of the world. We already are seeing that. Just as a case in point, you look at how much demand destruction is actually leading towards some of the highest sales of EVs just in the last month of March. And the longer this continues, the potential we'll see perhaps more demand destruction. But, from the Canadian perspective, we have the potential to not only become a major exporter of oil and natural gas, and we are now an exporter of natural gas more substantially, but then also, again, just the renewable power potential is also quite important to us, as well as nuclear. From the perspective that if you actually think that the next major challenge around sovereignty is data sovereignty, then we are going to have to take a look at how do we support that? And we need to support that with electrons. And how do we generate electrons? Well, we can generate electrons with a lot of different resources. And guess what? They're all here. So that is the potential that we have. But I think if we're looking for globally export markets, then, it's just paying attention to where some of that demand destruction is going at this moment. And that by the time that Canada becomes a bigger exporter of those products, will those markets be there and at what price? I think they will be. But at the end of the day, you need to compete on price and you need to compete on time.
Okay, we've only got a couple of minutes left here, 3 minutes, so you all have 60 seconds. We like to problem solve at the Globe. So I'm just going to put this to you all. What is kind of like a call to action, I guess, as we wrap up here? So what do you think would remove obstacles to major projects or accelerate the projects that you're involved in? So a couple of ideas. Let's start off with you. Chris?
Like Susanna said, didn't expect questions with regards to separatism, but I wanted to go back there really quickly.
Hey man, go for it.
Well, I'm based in Manitoba and Winnipeg. My family lives in Alberta, long history in Alberta. So I guess, as I thought about it, as the world that we live in today and what you read in the news every day in the past year, you kind of go, okay, well, I can almost understand what the separatists are saying. I have 3 kids. I think about their jobs and the opportunities and the careers that they might have. And I worry about destruction of that because we don't move quickly. So not sure if I fully understand separatism in a landlocked state. Having said that, I understand the sentiment, but I think that if we move if we move quickly, as people on the stage have said, and really do it smart and with determination, we'll get there. We don't need to talk about that. And then this is my way of going to the call to action. In Manitoba, this is a pitch here. In Manitoba, I sit across from Premier Wab Kinew, the most popular premier in Canada. In opinion polls, he's an NDP premier who sits across from us and says, "I can't believe I'm saying this. I'm for pipelines." And so, Northern Manitoba and Northern Manitobans and the Indigenous population in Northern Manitoba are perhaps not blessed with the resources that you perhaps see in Northern Alberta or in BC. So, this is a once in a generational opportunity for the region to participate. And there's an open door, and there's a premier, an NDP premier, Indigenous NDP premier in the province who says, come invest in the province, come invest and get our resources and our product to global markets and create a future for all Canadians. So that's my pitch here. That was, I thought of that with separatism.
Okay, we've gone over time, but hey, 30 seconds, 2 each.
Okay, I'll be really fast. So transparency is the currency of trust. And I think transparency matters at every level of engagement.
Yep.
And certainly on the ground. And again, one of the reasons, you see big projects go forward is because they've developed relationships that when you're building a project, the level of information sharing, particularly where there's challenges, needs to be more fluid. And I think where I see things get hung up, again, I'm talking about how you execute. It's when you're not having transparency with communities, with First Nations, with governments, and then obviously your shareholders. Nobody likes to not hear what's going on, particularly in difficult times. So if I'm going to get one thing, transparency, build relationships, and then we can get stuff done.
Cool. And you, Joe? One thing.
Make First Nations feel important. Engage them from the get-go. Find the money to finance their equity in these projects that are being talked about. Get the banks, get the financial institutions to come on board. And that's been our biggest drawback as First Nations is financing. It's been one of our biggest drawbacks. So I think if we can find those answers, and banks like CIBC and others can make that happen, then I think that's the key. So if you can make First Nations feel confident that they can be a part of these major projects, and they can promote them and own them and see the benefits from it, from cash flows that we enjoy with our investments. So that's really what they're looking for. And if we can achieve that, I think you've got the key.
Right on. Hey, thank you so much. We covered an awful lot of ground. Chris, Susanna, Joe, appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'm handing it over to my boss, Ryan McDonald. Colleague, boss, homie.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you to our panelists. Joe, specifically, I think we'd like to talk to you about the ownership of Trans Mountain. And we'd also like to talk to you about the ownership of whatever future pipeline may be making that southern route. So we will be following up with you directly. My name is Ryan McDonald, as Emma mentioned. I lead the energy and natural resources team at the Globe and Mail. And it is, it's with great excitement that I'm here in Calgary, and I think our team is certainly the one that is working with the most mojo right now. We are really excited about the opportunities that are presenting themselves from companies in Alberta and in BC. There was some talk about Trans Mountain. We haven't talked about Coastal GasLink, but these are the things that we're getting done as a country. I may also be the only one here today who's making a road trip out of this visit to Alberta. I'm planning to go to Waterton Lakes tomorrow to check out the first conventional oil well that was drilled in Canada. If anybody's got any tips on that, let me know. So through the afternoon, we've heard different speakers talk about change and uncertainty. Our next guest, I think, is going to approach that from the opportunity angle. I can't think of anybody better to do that. John McKenzie is president and CEO of Cenovus, which of course is a major Canadian-based integrated energy company headquartered right here in Calgary. And John became CEO in 2023. So please welcome to the stage, John McKenzie. Okay. We've got a lot to talk about.
Well, first things first, you want to stop in Turner Valley, not Waterton, to see the first one.
What's that?
I said you want to stop in Turner Valley to see the first one.
Oh, Turner Valley. Okay, Turner Valley. So that's the first, not the first conventional.
You're on your way.
I'm on my way. Okay, all right. I'm glad to be corrected on that. I wanted to talk about the situation in Canada, and there's been a lot of talk from governments about the opportunity for Canadian energy in many ways. You took a few minutes ahead of your Q1 call last week to address what you called a myopic dialogue that's happening on energy in Canada. And one thing that you said that I think is worth talking about for those in this room, and I think it's worth quoting, is we need a set of policies that are consistent with investment. Why did you think it was important to say that at that time? And why in that way?
But, first of all, I'd say, Ryan, I don't know that I said anything that was provocative or insightful. I think I just said something that a lot of people were already thinking. And one thing that we do as Canadians is we internalize a lot of common sense, and we don't always articulate it in public. But the point that I was trying to make in the Q1 conference call is I genuinely and truly believe that we have an opportunity as a country if we choose to capitalize on it. One of the things that is really unique about the oil and gas industry and really unique about this opportunity is it is all right in front of us, and it is entirely in our control. We are the only ones that are standing in the way of our own prosperity in terms of our standard of living and in terms of our quality of life. We just need to find a way to get out of our own way. And I think there's a couple of things that have happened over the last number of months that I think have brought this moment in time to us. One, I think it's generally understood right now globally that oil and gas are going to be a significant part of the energy mix for decades to come. Even after investing trillions of dollars in green renewable energy, hydrocarbons are still 80% of the energy mix, and our energy systems are complicated and they're embedded. I think the second thing that's happened is there's been a pivot in the view of energy to focus on energy security, and that's front of mind, and I've heard that concept be talked a lot about today. And energy security is about having abundant, reliable, affordable energy, and we are one of the few countries in the world that has all of that. So, what I was trying to articulate is, for the last 10 years, our policies have been myopically focused on climate and climate policy to the detriment of resource development. And we don't talk about the benefits that resource development brings to this country in terms of our quality of life and our standard of living. But I believe that the rhetoric can change, and I do believe that there is a moment now where we can have that broader discussion. That's what I was really trying to do in that moment.
What did you mean by the capital portion of that? I mean, the question of we compete differently for capital.
Well, I think what's happened over the last number of years, and particularly in the oil and gas industry, is capital has fled this country. So in spite of us having the fourth largest resource globally in terms of oil and having significant gas reserves, we do not have a competitive policy framework that enables capital to come and compete effectively with other jurisdictions. We've seen US companies, we've seen Europeans leave, and we're really left with what I think is a hollowed out industry. But if we can reverse some of this policy or reverse some of the momentum that we have on some of these restrictive policies and recognize that we need to compete for capital, capital will come back because the opportunity is too large.
So can you get into the specifics on that with me?
Sure.
What are the actual regulatory and policy measures that we need to address here?
Yeah, so what we have seen over the past number of years is a policy framework that has become, on the regulatory side, increasingly burdensome and increasingly inefficient. And it takes an incredibly long time to get a project built from the time that you have the idea to the time that you get regulatory approval to the time that you build it. And it's unacceptably long in terms of getting these projects off the ground and getting built. But the other thing that we've done is we've put in a series of policies that really make capital investment less attractive in my industry. An example I give you is the carbon tax. We are the only country among the 10 largest producers globally that has a carbon tax. And the carbon tax for our industry is nothing more than a cost. It doesn't incent us to decarbonize. It is solely a cost of doing business. So when you think about what we intended to do with the carbon tax, is it really works when it's globally applied and that can be passed on to the consumer. The consumer sees the higher cost of the product that they're consuming, and they consume less of it, and you get the price signal going back to the producer who produces less. What we've done is we've put a carbon tax on in Canada that is solely born in Canada, and we compete in the global market. So the products that we sell get a global price, so we're not able to pass that along to the consumer. So there's a breakage of the linkage in terms of what the policy was intended to do and what it actually does. So it's simply a cost of doing business that has to be incorporated into any investment decision. But we have that, plus we have the tanker ban, plus we have clean electricity regulations, plus we have methane regulations, and all of this is just combined to make an incredibly complicated policy framework that makes investments in Canada difficult and non-competitive with other countries like the US and countries in Asia.
I want to pick up on the carbon tax question. The Globe had a story today looking at this idea that the government in Alberta are close to reaching an agreement on an MOU that would set a carbon price of $130 per ton with a timeline to phase in at the year 2040. What do you think about that?
Well, first thing I'd tell you is I don't have much more insight than you do on this. This has been a bilateral discussion between the province and the federal government. Hoping to get more details on this over the next few days. But I don't think it changes the fundamental premise that I laid out, is this is just a cost that needs to be borne by the industry. So when we make investment decisions, we have to embed the cost of a carbon tax where we don't necessarily have to do this in other jurisdictions. So whether it's $130 a ton or $170 a ton, there is no other jurisdiction that does this. But the other piece that will be important is what is the stringency and the effectiveness of this over time? Does it continue to grow and become a bigger burden to us, or is this something that is going to be pushed out into the future and have less of a detrimental impact to us?
I'm interested in a couple of things that you said there. One is, do you feel like you're going to get a say at this table? Because it sounds like you'd like one.
I've made a career out of being apolitical, so I'm not sure I want to get into that at this stage of life. But, I do believe, when you kind of look at what's happening with this MOU, what we've talked about as an industry is it feels to me like the federal government wants us to do pathways. They want us to do carbon capture and sequestration. The provincial government wants a pipeline. What we've talked about is we need production. And production is, the only way we're going to get production is if we have, comprehensive regulatory reform. But when you think about carbon capture and sequestration, it is nothing more than a cost. There is no revenue line for it, and it costs about $1.5 billion per ton. So if we're going to sequester 10 megatons, it's going to cost about $15 billion of capital, and then there's going to be operating costs and sustaining capital on top of that. There is no revenue line, so there is no IRR, there is no return on it. Now, we as an industry will do some of this, but we have to maintain our competitiveness. We can afford to pay something, but we need the province and the federal government to come to the table as well. The provincial government is looking for a 1 million barrel a day pipeline to the West Coast. Well, they need industry to step forward and contract for that space. Well, the only way we can do that is if we grow our business significantly. We've got to come up with 1 million barrels a day of incremental production. The only way to do that is get going on some of these greenfield projects that have been delayed for the last decade. We haven't had a greenfield oil sands project built. We've had one in the last 10 years. So what industry has been saying is we have to be competitive with the rest of the world, and we have to compete for capital, because it's really the growth of the production that is going to provide the economics of what the province and the federal government want to do. The only incremental royalties and taxes are going to come from incremental production. Well, it costs sort of $1.5 billion per megaton to sequester CO2, the investment in producing another million barrels a day is probably somewhere in the $60 to $100 billion range. That is true economic growth that drives our standard of living, that drives our economy. So this is the piece that I think is missing in the discussion, is we can do pathways, we can do the pipeline, but we have to have production. In order to get production, we have to have fundamental policy reform.
I mean, I say this with all honesty, but, you know, yeah, I mean, how's that going for you? Because
I'm not used to coming to a room and having people clap when I speak, but I'm kind of reminded of the old George Bush when he came to Ottawa, and he thanked everybody for waving at him, especially those people that waved with all 5 fingers.
no, but seriously, I mean, you're trying to flip a script here. I mean, from my standpoint, we've got your provincial government and the federal government talking about two things that you say need to come after a discussion about production.
We're definitely the meat and the sandwich. And I think that we need to be at the table to help, not guide the discussion, but we need to be part of making, if we're going to breathe life into this MOU, you know, it has to be industry that does that. And there are things that have to happen if we're going to get to a place where this comes to life, and we're going to do carbon capture at a material scale. If we're going to really build a million barrel a day incremental pipeline, we have to find a way to grow oil sands, because it's the only part of the oil patch that's big enough in material to really make a difference.
Why isn't that discussion happening with the federal government at this point? Why is the discussion about a grand bargain? Why is the discussion about carbon capture? Why isn't the discussion about what we can do production-wise?
Yeah, you know, I think we've been trying to drive that discussion, and we've certainly, you know, made our ideas known. I think that the province and the federal government have been, you know, not unaware of our position, but they've chosen to, you know, take on this discussion on a bilateral basis right now versus a trilateral basis, and maybe things will change. You know, maybe once we get the next phase of the MOU behind us, you know, maybe that will evolve into a trilateral discussion. That's definitely where we need to go.
I find that whole discussion fascinating. I mean, I think what a lot of what Canadians are seeing and reading is simply what governments are saying to governments. I think the perspective of the producer here is obviously a pretty important one. So thanks for your honesty on that. I wanted to just zoom out a little bit and talk a bit about, you know, the disruption in global oil markets that we're experiencing right now. Obviously, we're talking about a lot of product that's being shut in the Mideast. I wonder what North American producers are seeing in terms of the opportunity as global supply chains start to adjust to a different reality.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things that you know, we have to think about as publicly traded companies is we need to run our companies for the long term, and our investments decisions are all predicated on long-term value, and we can do that with the resource base that we've got. But every 90 days, we also need to make magic happen, and we need to make our quarterly numbers and do those kind of things. That's always the challenge of running a public company. So what we are seeing today is we are seeing elevated pricing for the products that we produce, and it's right across the hydrocarbon spectrum in terms of, you know, the E&P side and the refining side and beyond. We haven't really seen that on the natural gas side simply because it's landlocked and it is a continental and in some cases a Western Canadian market. You know, we see a broader opportunity for Canada to play a much more important role in supplying global markets long term, but they certainly are not predicated on today's pricing. We run everything, or we stress test all our investments at $45 WTI. You know, today we're sitting at 100. You know, 2 months ago, we were sitting at $60 WTI. So we need to ensure that the investments that we make are for the long term and they can be profitable through time. And that extends, to the discussion we just had around carbon capture and sequestration. But, long story short is the resource base that we have in Canada is the envy of the world. It is immense. And it has much more potential than what we've shown over the last, particularly, I guess, 10 years. We have underinvested and we have latent capacity, that we can use to start to reform some of these supply chains, but not necessarily coming from Iraq or not necessarily coming from Iran or Saudi Arabia. We can be that global supplier of oil to the world that is safe, reliable, steady, and for Canadians, I think quite profitable. And that, the other thing I guess I'd point out is it's probably the one part of our economy that is really big enough, or the energy industry is the one part of our economy to really move the dial. And so it's something that we should really kind of think about as a country. The opportunity is right in front of us. It's been here for a while. We've chosen not to take advantage of it. But right now we have a moment. That's, I think that's important. And this is all right in front of us. This is our decision. This doesn't rely on President Trump. It doesn't rely on China. It doesn't rely on anybody but ourselves. And if we can get our collective act together, we have an opportunity to improve the lifestyle for Canadians for generations.
It's a great message, yeah. I should leave it there because I think it's a great message to leave on. I just wanted to ask you one more.
You're going to go to separatism, aren't you?
No. Well, since you mentioned it, I did want to talk to you about leadership, and
sure.
You lead a company that is a huge part of the Canadian economy.
Yeah.
So when people talk about separatism in Alberta,
I'm curious as how you're going to tie these two things together.
How should businesses confront that question? Because it becomes an economic one pretty quickly in terms of potential investment. So what do you say to your employees? What do you say to people who are talking about it?
One of the things we do as an industry and as a company, and this is not unique to us, everybody does this, is we manage risk. And, we have all kinds of risk, whether it's policy risk, geological risk, commodity price risk. And this is something that I guess is a little bit new that we haven't dealt with before. But, to be perfectly honest, it's not something that really keeps me up at night. It's not something that I really think about a great deal. The way I think about separatism in Alberta is there is a general feeling of disillusionment in Alberta that's kind of manifested itself over the past decade, and it's real. And I think the worst thing that we can do is, chalk this up to, a fringe element of society that shouldn't be taken seriously. I think the issues that have been raised are by and large real, but they're also by and large solvable. These are economic issues that are largely raised by, this group of separatists, and that makes them imminently solvable. And so my view is if we can do the kind of things that we talk about, if we can get the economy moving forward again, if we can invest in Canada, create jobs, my feeling is this kind of goes away. But on a day-to-day basis, when I think about allocating capital in our business and think about, all the risks that we have, it's really not very high on my radar.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the discussion. Yeah.
So thank you very much. Thank you.
We've got 15 minutes for you to recaffeinate.
In the interest of keeping the afternoon moving, and I appreciate everybody who's taken the time out today to spend with us. And in the interest of keeping it moving, I'd like to get going right now with our next panel, if that's all right. hope everybody enjoyed the break, got some coffee, took a moment to chat and meet some people. For those of you who might just be joining us, some people came in a little bit later. I'm Mark Eip. I'm the Alberta Bureau Chief for the Globe and Mail. Our next discussion is going to focus on innovation, tech, and AI. In Alberta, like most people, frankly, most people across the country, not just in Alberta, a lot of people wake up and they look at the oil prices and they want to see what's going on. In Alberta, that means we're looking at oil prices. It affects not just the prices at the pump where we fill our tanks, but it affects every aspect of life because it is such a big part of our economy. But it provides so many benefits to the province and for the nation as a whole, of course. Other industries and sectors, of course, are promising huge opportunities for diversification and growth. And we have two excellent speakers now who can speak to that. So let's introduce them now, and I'll bring them to the podium, bring them to the stage one at a time. So please welcome Deborah Yedlin, President and CEO of the Calgary Chamber of Commerce.
Okay, shake your hand. Yeah.
Like barely. Okay. And apparently we have walk-up music. And also joining us is Avik Dey, President and CEO of Capital Power.
No hype song?
I know, you didn't get the walk-up song, I know. I don't think I got one. Sorry, I'm laughing at the walk-up song.
That's all good.
You know, a lot of people in this room probably would know both of you, and have probably seen you speak, if met with both of you, but if you don't mind taking a minute to introduce yourselves and sort of say who you are and what you do again.
Sure. I'm Deborah Yedlin. I started as an investment banker and then moved on to becoming a journalist and a business columnist for the Calgary Herald, for the Globe and Mail, and also working for CBC. Became Chancellor of the University of Calgary in 2018, held a 4-year term, and took on the role of President and CEO of the Calgary Chamber of Commerce in July of 2021.
Avik Dey, President and CEO of Capital Power. I've been in the role 3 years, 25-year career in energy, private equity, and financial services, and really excited to be home and running an Alberta-based company.
Thank you. Thank you both for being here. So I guess first question, Deborah, I'll sort of start with you. Alberta is known as an oil and gas province. I mean, that's who we are to outside the province. Certainly, that's what we're known as. Yeah. There's obviously a lot more going on here than just that.
Yeah.
When we spoke earlier, when we were talking last week, I guess we talked a lot about how Alberta's trying to diversify and looking to diversify the economy. You know, and that's not new. That is going back decades. I mean, we've been doing this for a lifetime, right? How have we been doing in that realm? How have we been doing it to diversify?
Well, you know, what you said, Mark, and your remarks is, you know, people get up in the morning and look at the commodity price cycle. I would say that that's what everybody did up until 2014. Looked at what gas price was, looked at what the oil price was, and then carried on. And when the oil price crashed in 2014, all of a sudden, you know, if you looked at Peter Lougheed's speeches from the 1970s, he talked then about how important it was for us to diversify. But with that collapse in oil prices, the movement to diversify deliberately took root. And so we saw a number of different initiatives start to unfold, whether it was the creative destruction labs at the University of Calgary, whether it was, you know, more focus on AMI, on AI, on quantum computing that started to come into play. We saw a lot of people looking at ways to, I would say, transfer their skills. You know, we have the highest in Calgary, we have the highest per capita STEM educated population and a young one. And so math is math. You transfer your knowledge to something else. And so we saw, you know, the development of a number of big tech companies, whether it was Solium that now was subsequently sold to JP Morgan, We've seen a number of other big companies start. Neo Financial is another example. So we've been seeing this growth in ag tech, fintech, clean tech, obviously leveraging our knowledge in the energy sector and understanding how to sort of apply that in the context of decarbonization. So it really is it's a different landscape than it was in 2014. We've really focused on it.
And do you see that as the big opportunity for us? Is that where we should be aiming? And is that our target? Is that where we're going?
Well, I think we're looking at the and conversation. We look at energy and what does that look like? And we know that, from an energy standpoint, it's critical to realizing the ambitions from a data perspective, from an AI perspective, from a quantum perspective. We need to have the energy to back up the economic growth that we're actually seeking to continue to grow in the province. And so energy is part of everything we do every day. And I think that once again, the conflict in the Middle East has shown us that story is just as resonant as it was 20 years ago.
I mean, we have aspirations, we have great aspirations in the province. How do you see, or what do you see as the big roadblocks for us? Again, when we spoke last week, we talked a little bit about that. But what are the big roadblocks that you see for us reaching our goals or reaching where we want to go or see down the road?
Well, every speaker today has been talking about the same things, which is we have to move from ambition to execution. Hello? Good morning. Everyone talks about we need to move into execution from ambition. And if we're talking about Alberta specifically, John talked about earlier just the need for regulatory certainty to be able to move to execution and build. What I would say as we talk about building Canada, building Alberta, for 75 years, for the most part, we were the best in class on the planet at building infrastructure. That's what we did. We do it better than everyone else. And oh, by the way, we've got all the EPC firms in Canada to prove that we're better than everybody at it. For the last 13 years, those same engineers and technical experts have been exported. We've been exporting talent to go build stuff for everybody else. We need to go build that stuff here. So, to quote Ricky Bobby, if you ain't first, you're last. And that all the Gen Xers will know that reference. But that's the time and space we're in right now. So for me, the big hurdle of going from ambition to execution is we live in a society that's built on a meritocratic decision-making system, which is essentially keeping score, right? How do we build a system that's fair, that's transparent, that has the checks and balances, that results in equitable process? Well, guess what? That doesn't work, right? We need to apply informed judgment. We need to pick winners. We need to move to execution and pick the things that will allow us to nation build. I'm very grateful that the federal government and the provincial government undertook that informed judgment with regard to clean electricity regs, frankly. We could systematically go through a process and say, should we repeal clean electricity regs? But the Premier and the Prime Minister came to an agreement that, hey, this doesn't work for Alberta. It's not in the net interest of Canada for Alberta to have this stringency requirements. So let's figure out a better mousetrap to allow us to move forward and build. And so that ties into, why we think AI is such a great opportunity for the province here.
Do you think that there are some policy changes that have been made that have sort of worked in that direction already? Do you think that are there specific policy regulations or policy changes that you think that need to be made, that should be coming or should happen?
At every level, yes. So when we're looking at, so let's just simplify this for a moment. I have a project I want to build. Let's call it a large data center servicing a hyperscaler in the middle of Alberta. Well, for me to advance that from an idea or a sales pitch, I need to spend money. I need to put capital estimates together. I have to put timelines together. I have to source supply chain. Well, from that infancy of that idea, where I have a class 5 estimate and I'm swagging what my capital cost estimate is, to be able to make a final investment decision, there's time, there's capital, there's expertise, and there's certainty. So whether it's at a environmental level or whether it's community partnerships, whether it's, getting it to a point that's ready to make an FID, at every level, whether it's local, provincial, federal, stakeholder engagement, we need more certainty. Because as a capital allocator, I can't put that risk capital out without knowing I can get to the finish line. So yeah, I have a concrete example of that at Capital Power where we failed. Carbon capture and sequestration. We made the bet that we were going to be able to do the things we said we were going to do on carbon capture and carbon tax, and then we didn't get there. Well, we put capital and people and time into that to not get there at the end.
Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's something that we've been talking about for, like Avik said, the last 10 years for sure. And the only way you attract, we know that what we need to do in order to take advantage of the opportunities that John McKenzie was talking about is we need to attract capital to the province. And anything that stymies the ability to provide that certainty and the policy durability for companies to attract investment is going to prevent that economic opportunity from really happening. And I think, I keep going back to 1998, Suncor decides to go ahead with Project Millennium based on two very important aspects that were put in place by the former government, the government at the time. And that unlocks that Project Millennium when oil prices are about to dip below $10 a barrel, unlocks the billions of dollars that we've seen since and brought us to where we are today from a production standpoint. But that was the certainty they could rely on. Investors said, okay, we believe it. We're going to allocate capital. We're going to let you, you're going to raise debt. You're going to sell equity, whatever it is. But we believe in this viability of this project. That is exactly what's been missing.
Both of you used the word certainty just now, and several speakers have said that. And I'm sure everybody in the room has their Globe and Mail app and has seen.
There's probably a few synonyms we could use instead.
Yeah. Has seen the Globe and Mail app and seen the news just a moment ago. A judge just ruled and quashed the separatist petition, actually. So which will provide certainty. It doesn't mean that there will not be an independence question on the referendum in the fall. That's still a possibility. The Premier could still call for that. She's up in about an hour speaking, so we'll hear what she has to say then. But going back to, again, certainty, and you brought up data centers. We've talked a lot about data centers. The Premier has talked about it and bringing them in and bringing them into the province and the possibility of the great possibility that it might have for the province. But not just that. I mean, there's quantum computing and there's AI. There's so many technologies are there. But one of the it's a big bet. It's a big swing that the province is hoping that we're gonna have happen. But power is the big problem. Is the question, and how are we going to power these centers? Avik, do you want to?
So we would not be in this conversation globally unless we had power and we had natural gas to fuel that power, and we didn't have a rule of law that allowed you to build and own and operate these assets with certainty, and we didn't have, depending on which hyperscaler you talk to, the data sovereignty laws that allowed you to use that compute capacity. So it is without question a generational opportunity for a technology that is literally changing the way we live, we work, and how society interacts with each other. So the question shouldn't be if we should participate. The question is, it's coming at us, and do we want to lead or not? And we have, fortunately for us, the ability to to captivate that for our economy here in Canada on the basis of something we've always done really well historically, which is build infrastructure and deliver energy. So today, power is the single bottleneck that is at the front of the decision-making framework for where to build capacity. If we didn't have the opportunity because of speed to market at scale for large load for hyperscalers in Alberta, we would not be in the conversation. It's all about the fact that we've got the infrastructure, we've got the regulatory environment to allow to build capacity, and we have excess capacity in our transmission distribution infrastructure that allows for us to do this without compromising affordability for the ratepayer. We have capacity that's installed today that won't compromise reliability for the consumer. We can't say that in other parts of North America today. So we have to be fast. We've got to have certainty. So I think this is a great opportunity for Alberta because of the structure and the low cost supply that we have in natural gas. And I think it contributes to the overall data security conversation because ultimately we must have sovereign compute in Canada and we need a place to put it.
And why not put it in Alberta? I think that what everybody seems to forget is that we are an unregulated market. And so we have the ability to look at attracting investment to build the power that we need to support the opportunity. The Premier said, they're hoping for $100 billion of investment by 2030. We know that there's 21 gigawatts of power that's sort of on the horizon in terms of what the demand looks like. And it's something that we do have to have conversations. And I do think some of it will be a balance of how do we allocate that power through the province. But, the other piece is, of course, there's a water issue when it comes to data centers and how the cooling aspects of it. But again, because we are where we are as a province, we do have water in northern Alberta. Southern Alberta is a different conversation. But certainly we have a bit of an advantage. We're in the pole position, let's put it that way.
But I would add to that, Deborah, a data center is not a data center is not a data center.
Yeah.
So we have this scarce resource today, which is excess capacity that we can allocate to move us to the front of the line on building out compute. But a large data center servicing a hyperscaler with AI compute is not the same as a small to mid-sized multi-client data center that's doing short-term leases. It's not the same as a offsite storage data center. And so we do need to exercise informed judgment on which sites are to the net benefit of the province in the industry and the country at large.
Yes, we want to tell Alberta's story, to tell everybody who we are, tell the rest of the country, tell the rest of the world who we are. Are we doing a good job at that?
I think we've never done a good job of that, actually. And I just, when I think about it, as a journalist, always trying to tell the story about what was going on in Alberta, and certainly when the energy sector was a very big part of my career. But as things started to change, I really wanted to map out what was happening from a technology standpoint. And we've seen so much that's changed. We still don't tell that story. We had one of the biggest exits of a technology company in the last month, a company called Cool IT Systems, the 25-year startup that was an overnight success, right? For $6 billion sold to a US company. There's been so much innovation in this province that has been applied across the board. We don't talk about that as much as we should. We also don't talk about the fact that the University of Calgary generates more startups than any other U15 university in the country, and it's done that for the last 6 years. It has the biggest sort of philanthropic fund to fund startups. And so we are a province of risk takers. We're a province of entrepreneurs, and we want to look for advantages and opportunities. And we want to look for opportunities that we can take advantage of across the board. Calgary has the largest number of ag tech startups in the country. So we are energy, and we are so many other things. Whether it's geothermal technology that's being developed by a company called Ever. There's AMI, the Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute, which was an interesting, one of the top institutes in the world. It was a bet in 2002. The Alberta government decided, let's look at this. Let's be forward-looking. Where can we make a difference? And now that investment has certainly paid off in terms of AI and the research that we're seeing. And so we're not the one-trick pony that everybody thinks we are. There are so many things going on. And a lot of knowledge has been transferred from energy into other sectors.
How do you feel about the conversation or the story that we tell?
To me, the story is, it's not so much about Alberta, it's about country. And you know, when I have this conversation in the US, 60% of our business is in the US. We're the fifth largest gas IPP in North America. And almost unequivocally, when I'm having this discussion in the US, it's country over state. Here, it's province over country.
That's true.
And guess what? We're a country today that is, 40 million people, country A. Country B is 40 million people. Country A has a GDP of just over $2 trillion. Country 2 has a GDP of $4.5 trillion. Country A is Canada. Country 2 is the state of California.
Yeah.
That's the
So if we want to be relevant, we're 40 million people with half the size of the economy of the state of California. And we're totally dependent on the US as our trade partner, which I would say has been critical to our overall success for over a century. So at some point, we have to get over ourselves of, yes, our feelings were hurt because the US has come at us on this trade, but they are our strongest ally and partner and have been for a really long time. And so how do we catalyze, when Harry talks about us being the envy of the world right now, why? Because we have a effective century-long partnership with the most important country in the world. So we have to catalyze that. Yes, it's important to build other relationships. Yes, it's important to have other, export markets. But this relationship with the US for us is about us as Canadians coming together and doing what's in the net benefit of us as a country, because that's what they're doing. And that relationship with the US is critical to that outcome.
I mean, to that point, I'll sort of circle back a little bit to this conversation that's been happening around independence and separatism and this national unity question that has probably been bubbling up for a while. Do either of you, do you see that as it is a hurdle, but do you see it as an easily overcome hurdle if it fades away, if it drifts away?
I think that, we look at it from a couple of different perspectives. One is, of course, as John McKenzie mentioned earlier, companies manage risk. And from we're hearing as a chamber, increasingly conversations about investors, it's about what does this really mean? How real is it? And directors are saying, it's on their risk register in terms of what they're looking at from a future investment standpoint. It's something that we have to be very aware of. I think, the political landscape is probably changing in Alberta as a result of what's going on right now. But I do think that we are fortunate as a country to have the resources that we have and the opportunities that lie before us, and we need to make sure that we preserve that.
Look, the answer from a business perspective is very clear, which is a united Canada is better than a separate Alberta. Period, full stop. There's no argument otherwise. And so within that context, the sentiment shared by Albertans of the frustration with federation, there's no question that is real. And I think we have to acknowledge that it's real. But I also would say that I haven't heard a sentiment issued by anyone who's in support of separatism that doesn't result in a better Canada too.
It's not worth breaking the country over.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we have to keep thinking about, broadly speaking.
And it's fundamentally economically driven. So at the end of the day, what's good for Alberta is good for Canada. And this crisis or the potential for a referendum is about uniting around what's in the collective interest of Alberta. But for me, it's really about, it's in the interest of Canada anyways.
And I think we go back to a conversation between Peter Lougheed and the late Pierre Trudeau number one, who speaks for Canada. We all do. And I think that's what we have to remind ourselves.
Well, I think we'll leave it at that. And thank you very much for both of you for joining us. And thank you. Thank you both. Thank you. Am I supposed to introduce you? That's good. Oh, I don't think I'm supposed to. Am I supposed to introduce you? I think you're just one of them. I'll introduce myself. Yeah, I was going to say. All right.
Hey, everyone. So for a province that's prided itself on its free market approach to business, Alberta's stance on renewable energy stands out as the outlier. The industry was once responsible for a multi-billion-dollar investment boom, but the provincial government slammed the brakes on in 2023 with its moratorium, then new restrictions, and investment has virtually dried up. Last year, installation of wind, solar, and batteries were down 93% from the 2022 peak, according to the Pembina Institute. I'm Jeff Jones. I cover ESG and sustainable finance for the Globe and Mail Report on Business. And I'm here to help our experts break down what's happened since, where things are going, and what we can expect with the energy world very much in flux. So let me introduce our panel. You can make your way up here, folks. Dan Balaban is CEO and Executive Chair of Greengate Power. You may know Greengate for building Canada's largest solar farm just south of town here. Martha Hall Findlay, making her way to the stage, is Director of the School of Public Policy at the University of Calgary. She's also the James S. and Barbara A. Palmer Chair in Public Policy. She's also a veteran of government, think tanks, the corporate scene, stage and screen. And Furman Latimer is founder and CEO of First Nations Power Development. So welcome, join me in welcoming these fine folks here. So Dan, I'd like to start with you. The Traverse Solar Farm, which I mentioned, that you developed, was just getting into its operational phase when the government imposed its moratorium on renewables development. So how has the landscape changed since then?
The landscape has changed very dramatically. I started Greengate almost 20 years ago. So I've been in this industry for a while. We've been focused on developing renewables almost exclusively in Alberta at that time, and we've fortunately been quite successful. About 20% of the renewables on the grid today are projects that my company developed. So I think I have a good perspective on this. Alberta was the leading jurisdiction in Canada, one of the leading jurisdictions in North America for renewables development from about 2018 to 2023. That was largely driven by phenomenon called corporate renewable procurement. Some of the world's largest companies that were looking to green their energy supply. Alberta is a great place. You know, we've got an embarrassment of riches on the renewables side and the fossil fuel side. So that was driving a tremendous amount of activity with virtually no government money involved in that, just a framework that was working. Then what ended up happening, in my view, is we got smacked by the politics of division. On one side, we had the federal government that was pushing very hard for clean electricity regulations that were going to require Alberta to be net zero on its grid by 2030, an extremely aggressive goal. And then on the other side, you had the province that was not supportive of that at all And what ended up happening is I believe the renewable energy industry was caught in the crossfire of that battle. The province imposed a moratorium on renewables development in 2023. I think it was an extremely hostile move, unnecessary. It was like taking a jackhammer to a nail. And then that followed up with a complete redesign of the electricity market in Alberta that's still ongoing. So therefore, we are currently paused.
And we're in a time now when, build, baby, build is the mantra.
Yeah, it's absurd. I think it's absolutely absurd. I don't think it's absurd that there was a disagreement between the province and the feds on this issue. I do think we need to find a pragmatic approach forward. But I do think it's absurd that we willingly turned away what was billions of dollars of investment coming into the province. Like I said, with some of the world's largest companies, the hyperscalers, like my company alone, we did a deal with Microsoft on one of our wind farms, a deal with Amazon on the Travers project that you're referring to, the very same companies that we're now trying to attract for data centers. So it's a head scratcher to me. There's got to be a better way forward.
Well, Martha, put this in a global context for us, because a lot has changed in the past year and a half. I mean, think about energy security, trade, affordability, the rise of AI. Is Alberta meeting the moment when it comes to electricity, which plays like the crucial role in all of these things?
Well, first, if I can, the clean energy thing, and I know it's the title, but I do struggle because it right away sets up the as opposed to what? Dirty. And I think that speaks to where you had a federal government that was so focused on, shutting down the so-called dirty in favor of the clean that it set up a false dichotomy. And I just, if we have natural gas powered electricity, combine it with CCUS, it's as clean as a solar farm or a wind farm. I just want us to recognize that from my perspective, it's all of the above. And I say that, and Dan knows this, we've had this conversation. I've been a solar power user for 30 years. That means I'm like a seriously early adopter.
The OG.
And I think it's fantastic, right? Sometimes I wonder why every roof doesn't have solar panels, because it's really quite an astounding technology and opportunity. But man, do you get politics in the way. I think where Alberta has a huge asset in doing it right to the question, we don't highlight the fact that we have an unregulated electricity market enough. There are other jurisdictions in Canada that I think would really love to have the ability to do stuff in this the way we can do that in this province. I'm going to be a bit more diplomatic about political decisions in Alberta. I will just say I would love to see way more renewables, way more solar, way more wind in Alberta, because we're blessed with a lot of sun and a lot of wind, and that deregulated market, which in theory should be able to take full advantage of that. It's an opportunity for Alberta, 100%, but to me, there's an all of the above opportunity for us. You listen to the stats, or you look at the stats, the hyperscalers talking about it, anybody talking about what's going to be needed to really attract that kind of data center. It's a lot of energy, and I think Alberta is incredibly well positioned to do it, but let's just understand it should be all of the above.
Okay. Well, other places seem to have gotten the message. I mean, Texas, of all states in the US, has the all of the above philosophy down to a T. I mean, there's no restrictions on anything when it comes to development. It's really stunning. Furman, let's turn to you. Canada is hopefully getting the message by now that there's no development without Indigenous nations as full partners. So what's been your experience at First Nation power development on the clean energy front? And given what we've already heard, what does the future look like?
Yeah, thanks. Well, a couple things. As we're all aware, the federal government was basically a call for electrification, a call for a lot of investment into our grid and greening our electricity. Alberta, given the structure of the market, it's ideal set up for that. Anybody can enter, anybody can participate in power production. So this looked like an ideal pathway to build for First Nations to start participating in this transformation. And there was a lot of emphasis that was coming from the federal government to, align economic reconciliation or economic participation through this transition. So it looked like an obvious win to get involved. And then we spent a few years learning, understanding as an organization how we can fit in, taking advantage or creating pathways to, set up capital investment. Indigenous communities have access to special purpose financial vehicles, Canadian Infrastructure Bank, AIOC, now with the Federal Loan Back Guarantee Program. So there's a lot of barriers are being decreased when it comes to accessing capital. And then, getting into the political, the position between Alberta and the feds, also trying to get our heads wrapped around that. So we with what's going on politically right now and in the province of Alberta, we seem to be getting a lot more attention from different ministers and MLPs. So we're getting, some time to sit down and engage and talk with them. And, some of the feedback did somewhat make sense on what's happening. There was a huge rush, like 5-6 years ago, 4 years ago, for a lot of renewable energy development, but that's a product of Alberta being an open and free market. It's almost to a point where there's a saturation of power production, and because it's an open and free market based on supply and demand, you're seeing an oversupply and it's decreasing basically the rates, which is good for the consumer, but not good for the capital investment, right? So, we came in, made some capital investments, and also wondering, okay, why at this point, are all these projections seem to be different? But it's, the feedback we got, it's just part of this market. It will be corrected once we start seeing some potential data centers come on. It's going to be a correction, and that's all part of how the economy flows here. So,
just very quickly, describe a little bit about what your company does and how it partners with both nations and investors.
Yeah, so my background is not renewable energy from the start. I've been working with Indigenous communities for the last 15 years internally, supporting them, developing internal capacity to participate in the economy. So I started working for a community called Ochis in the early 2010s, surrounded by oil and gas, and seeing the opportunity to participate in that and understanding how to mobilize the communities to do that. And then seeing what's happening with this transition, I saw a gap to position First Nations to participate in these projects and be leaders. So the purpose of FN Power is to support Indigenous communities that align with their values to get into these projects and provide them with capacity and organize them accordingly to enter into these markets. So we did that with the initial project in Southern Alberta in partnership with Alexander First Nation, created a framework, participated in taking a 50% ownership position in a project called Tilly. We're supporting Paul First Nation in the Walwoman area, put together a 36 megawatt solar facility on their lands, which will inject about $65 million in capital once it goes through. And then we're also supporting Setina First Nation, getting them prepared for the next cluster study, which once it does come on, it could be one of the largest on-reserve power plants in Alberta. So
okay.
Yeah.
Dan, you're also involved in the data center world. So with all that's happening with the changes in Alberta's electricity market, are we going to have the generation and the grid to support some of these pretty lofty expectations with regard to capital investment in AI data centers?
I mean, we certainly have a challenge ahead of us, but I think what we're seeing is grids all over the world that are increasingly becoming under strain through a combination of things. We have the electrification of our economy that's been going on for a while with EVs and industrial heating applications and in buildings. But now you've got this recently emerged source of demand growth, which is AI. It's like, predicted to grow very fast. So grids are challenged everywhere. What we have as a big advantage in Alberta is we're sitting on an ocean of natural gas, and we have abundance, solar and wind. We have an abundance of energy resources. We can produce them here. And I think we've heard, the Premier talk about this in the past, about data center developers need to bring their own power. So I think what we're going to see going forward is if we're going to see really massive data centers here, and I'm not sure if that's going to be the case, but if that's the case, I think there's going to have to be a strong off-grid component to it. I'm also a partner in a energy and AI-focused VC firm called Augur VC. We've invested in a company called Simply Silicon, which has a slightly different approach. So you got the large data centers, which are needed for training the big models. But there's also a tremendous amount of compute that's required for running the applications that run on the already trained models. That's called inference. So we're developing our first data center here in Calgary. We're actually going to have our first clusters deployed at the District Energy Center downtown. And that's a place, for example, that has existing power generation. Mm-hmm. It's only 12 megawatts, not a gigawatt. But 12 megawatts of compute is hundreds of millions of dollars of chips. Even these small projects are very significant. So I think we're going to see a range of opportunities in Alberta, maybe some smaller inference types of facilities that serve our local need, possibly some of these large training centers, but I think that's going to require off-grid power.
Well, Martha, you've talked about all of the above. We need it all. With or nukes?
With or nukes. There's been a lot of talk about SMR, small modular reactors. One is being developed in Ontario. There are a couple of countries, Korea, for example, is very, very involved in building SMRs. But people say to me, well, it's super expensive. Big nuclear is super expensive as well. Nuclear, just plain and simple, is expensive. One of the prospects for SMRs is that as you build more of them, you build up economies of scale and hopefully see some of the costs go down. The other benefit of small nuclear reactors is the ability to move them to different places. I'm not sure Alberta necessarily needs nuclear because we have a tremendous amount of natural gas that we can use for creating electricity. We have renewables that we should be using more of. What I think is very interesting, a colleague of mine, RJ Johnson, who runs our energy policy area at the School of Public Policy, has some really fantastic stats about global. You asked about global. One of the biggest draws or biggest demands for electricity globally won't actually be data centers, will actually be things like air conditioners and more appliances as more of the world's population moves into middle income strata, and the demand for those kinds of appliances is going to go up and is already and will continue to go up dramatically. The difference that I think people forget is that electricity is not something you can just export. You can't just do transmission lines across oceans, right? So for electricity demand globally, there is going to be some demand for things like SMRs because they're just going to need a whole lot of power. They're not necessarily blessed with hydroelectricity or blessed with natural gas to create it. So they're going to have to look at other ways of developing electricity. Data centers, on the other hand, so if you're wanting to feed all of this appliance-driven electricity demand, you need to be able to get electricity to where those people need it, right? The difference with data centers is that data centers can come where the electricity is. And that's the opportunity for Alberta. It's a huge opportunity. I totally agree. I think a lot of it will be probably off grid, because man, managing a grid is not the easiest thing in the world. But that therein lies an opportunity, especially as I said, with an unregulated electricity market. So in a number of areas, it is a really interesting opportunity for Alberta. Nuclear, I'm not sure, but I've been a fan of nuclear for decades. I'm really hoping that we see, certainly globally, and maybe Alberta can participate in helping Canada help the rest of the world perhaps embrace more in the way of nuclear and either big or small modular reactors. So
Okay.
I think Alberta has more of an opportunity to participate in helping that than in terms of necessarily needing nuclear to supplant our electricity needs.
Just jump in. I think we're in a world where energy is becoming increasingly scarce, and we're seeing that with conflicts now erupting around the world, and energy being central, to that issue. Ultimately, we need to build it all. Alberta has, like I said, an embarrassment of riches in fossil fuels, in renewables. We have, historically a very good place to do business. And we should be pursuing all of it. And if there's private proponents that, I know some private proponents that are advancing nuclear projects, if they're able to raise the capital, by all means, right? Like, let's get out of people's way that are trying to deliver the projects that are ultimately providing us what we need, which is energy.
Okay. Well, I signed a contract saying that I have to ask about separation, and so I'm going to shoot this one at you, Furman. So because this is one that we've really talked about yet, and this has to do with the obvious friction that's built up between a number of the First Nation chiefs and the provincial government over this issue. How might that affect future energy development by First Nations in Alberta, if at all?
Oh, man.
Over to you.
Yeah. I think Joe Dion did a great job of maybe talking about the positions better than I would. From what I can see, the political friction, sometimes it creates mediation. Maybe that's what's happening right now, right? With the provincial government and the federal government, it's meant to create some form of mediation to resolve some outstanding issues. And it's, and recently the chiefs of Alberta have united unanimously to have a vote of non-confidence in the current premier and the controlling government. So, will this open up opportunities for mediation? We hope so, and come to some common grounds and some common understanding of how the resources have been shared and split, and how there's agreements that were meant to be honored, which haven't been honored, and we should be working in partnership. Hopefully that gets sorted out, and we can get to a better place where everybody's winning. It creates the stability and investment that's coming into the province, obviously. And yeah, it needs to be reconciled, and like on a number of issues. So yeah.
Can I just every time I hear this, and I have a lot of scars on battling the infamous Bill C-69 and the tanker ban, which is totally un-Canadian from my perspective. No shortage of frustration over the last 10 years and more, frankly, because I think we've lost a full quarter century of opportunity in this country. We didn't build a whole lot before the last government either, right? We haven't been getting things done. The last 10 years were particularly frustrating, for sure. And you can understand why so many people in this province are angry. They want to send a message. I get that. But it's going to help how exactly? You're going to have an easier time building a pipeline to the West Coast if you're not part of Canada? I don't understand that. And I think this is something we're just not having enough of a discussion about. It makes 0 sense economically. If you're pissed off that the federal government hasn't allowed Albertans to really explore and benefit from our own prosperity, you're not going to get it if you're all alone, okay? And so I've been listening to some of the results from Brexit, right? And I got to say, like, I know a lot of people have been suggesting, we let this happen. It's probably better to do the referendum and get it over with. That's what David Cameron thought, right? And look how that turned out. And the numbers of the stats on the decrease in the GDP of the UK since Brexit are staggering, absolutely staggering. So I get the frustration. I was frustrated. We've all lived through that. But let's focus on how we can increase Alberta's prosperity, not do something, frankly, really dumb to actually make it a whole lot harder to achieve our prosperity. So I just,
So we're nearly done, but so this is going to be a lightning round question for all of you. And it's one that, like, 2 years ago would have been the first question, and we would have talked about it the entire time. So I'm going to start with you, Dan. What about climate change?
Climate change still matters, but it's not the number one factor in strategic decision making. It was for a while leading into COVID, and then we came out of that with a very different world. So I think sustainability is important. Costs have come down. I think we're going to continue driving in that direction if we get out of the way, but we need to worry about practical considerations like security, reliability, affordability alongside that.
Okay. Martha.
Well, I have just recently suggested that we postpone the Pathways project for CCUS, which raised a few eyebrows because that was kind of my baby and put a lot of years into actually building that project. When we started that project, there was a global consensus, or almost a consensus, of a whole lot of countries willing to actually take action, spend money on projects to reduce emissions globally, because climate change is a problem. If we were all going to do our part, then Canada, even though we contribute 1.3% of global emissions, the oil sands, the Pathways project would reduce global emissions by a whopping 0.02%. It's negligible. But in the moment, if all the countries around the world were collaborating, then it felt like it was important for Canada to do its part. Don't know if you noticed, but the world has changed. And there is virtually no other country in the world that is focusing on that. They're focusing on affordability. They're focusing on security. So for Canada to then just be the only one out there and spending billions of dollars in the process, it doesn't make sense. Canada has to look after its own interests. It's not that we're turning our back on climate at all. It is that we need to recognize how we can, this is a bit of a false arrogance, how we can actually on our own make that difference. That's not going to happen now. So let's postpone, focus on the realities that we have right now globally. And I sure hope that at some point in the not too distant future, collectively, we can go back to thinking how we can address what is a global challenge.
Okay, Furman, last word to you.
I think behind the scenes is still on the forefront. It's just not right in your face the way it was before. I think that's all shifted. It's a hard argument to make when it comes to economy and, a place like this, I guess. But I think it's still conscious on a lot of people's minds, and maybe, just policies changing, just not in the forefront, but it's still happening.
Okay, well, everybody, please join me in thanking this terrific panel. Well done, folks. Thank you. And now I'd like my good colleague Patrick Breathauer to come up and come to the stage. Thanks very much.
More great music. Well, thanks, Jeff. Hello, everyone. My name's Patrick Breathauer. I'm the editorials editor for the Globe and Mail, and I'm very pleased to be moderating our final discussion. So we see editorials at the Globe as a running conversation with readers. We share our thoughts, then you share your thoughts with us through comments and letters to the editor, and boy, oh boy, do you share your thoughts. And today, this next discussion is part of that conversation. Our final speaker really needs no introduction, but he's going to get one anyways. I'm delighted to sit down with Stephen Pollitz, Special Advisor at Osler, Hoskin and Harcourt, and you may also know him as the former Governor of the Bank of Canada. He's a widely recognized economist with 40 years of experience in financial markets, forecasting, and economic policy. And as an officer of the Order of Canada, he has made and continues to make significant contributions to our nation. Please welcome to the stage, Steve. So we've heard about an awful lot of things happening in 2020. Separatism, pipelines, a lot of tumult. But I'm wondering if we take a longer view, what do you see as the big challenge of the next decade?
How do we pick just one?
Well, a number if you want, but
okay.
What do you see lingering?
But all kidding aside, I mean, you're right. There seems to be so many things going wrong right about now. But I do see an important common driver, one that doesn't get enough play, at least in the way I think it should. And that is, and we've talked a lot about it today, which is technology. Okay, so it's not just technology, not just a new iPad that's more powerful, that kind of thing. We're talking about digitalizing pretty well everything we do. I mean, literally everything, right? If it hasn't been digitalized yet, it's going to be. Otherwise, that company's out of business. Digitalizing everything we do, that's what we call building a digital twin of your organization, but then deploying AI in order to act as an agent or an interface between humans and that complicated, incredibly complicated structure. You take a financial institution nowadays, it's hundreds of millions of lines of code. Like the idea that you're gonna add a new product to it, without messing something up. It's crazy. So AI, we call it AI if you want. AI is just part of that digitalization thing. And so I think of that as this is the fourth industrial revolution. So you say fourth, wow, there's only been 3 times, that's right. So you think, well, this is a pretty unique point in history, I believe. And the other 3 give us a lot of lessons for what we're in for. And so the other 3, of course, are a steam engine, electricity, and the computer chip, the basic PC. And so we learned most probably about the latest one, the PC, which showed up in, 1983, maybe. I remember I was at the Bank of Canada, just a young researcher, and then they rolled up this thing. There was a PC sitting on it. I said, well, what's that for? Anyway, one day I was sitting there working away, writing a paper. And one of my bosses came by and said, what the hell are you doing? I said, well, I'm writing a paper. No, you're not, you're typing. There's people just up the hall, they type all day. Get back in your office and do some real work and give it to the typists. And I said, no, I'm actually writing. I don't have notes. I'm just, looking at my numbers and my statistics. And I said, so I'm writing in real time and I revise and it's neat. And he goes, that's never going to catch on. Well, and also that whole thing, started in 1983, and by the mid-1990s, we were still looking for productivity benefits, okay? And it was then about then that it really started to pick up speed. And I remember Greenspan struggling, why isn't inflation going up? That kind of thing. So anyway, I see this as essentially a replay. And so if you study the first 3 industrial revolutions as I have, there's certain things that always happen. First of all, you always get a K-shaped economy, and it really widens, okay? So that's the winners at the top.
There's the K.
The losers at the bottom, okay? Those who are left behind by the new technology. You always get that. Second thing you always get is growing political polarization, because somebody's going to tap into that discontent stream and begin to identify with it.
Sure, it started with the Luddites, continued on.
Well, that's exactly right. And so you always get that. And so you also get this increased risk of volatility, because you're getting sort of haphazard, what's called populist policies, whether it's from the left or the right, which is intended, it's well-intentioned, is to help people are being hit, but it's usually aimed at the wrong thing. And so we're still living in a hangover of the third industrial revolution. Like the K is quite wide in most countries right now. Okay, the other thing that we always get in these industrial revolutions is we get a tremendous uptick in human progress or income per person, with GDP per person or whatever, a productivity gain. And we always create more jobs than are destroyed, every single time. And the last thing that we get, and this is from, the Peter Howitz research. You remember Peter just won the Nobel Prize, one of my professors, by the way, just saying. Anyway, on my thesis advisory group. So, but one of the things we note is that about 90% of the gains from a new general purpose technology are reaped by the general population. The inventors only end up with like 5 to 10% of the gains, and all the big stuff comes from the deployment.
Sure.
All right, and we all win. All right, so all those things are what I think we can expect to see over the next, let's say, 10 years for sake of argument. It looks like each of the 3 previous industrial revolutions went faster than the one before. And so I expect the same thing to be true this time, but that's still measured in like decades, because the PC took 20 years to have much of an effect, right? And so let's say this might be 10 years, it could be 15, it could be 8, I don't know, but it's long enough that we're just getting started. And so the most important thing is we can expect all those things to happen again. If we're already got a big dispersion of income, it's going to get worse. We think politics is hard to deal with today. It's going to get worse. You think there's more geopolitical adventurism going on when you're paying more attention to your own backyard than you are to international affairs. That's what's happened each of the other 3 times. So it's going to get worse. And so the volatility that we're living in today is maybe nothing compared to what we'll be in 5 years from now. So apart from that, though, everything should be just fine.
Everything's fine. Message, everything's fine. I think we can end the panel right
It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine.
So we know that there'll be a problem. We know that the K will get even bigger. We have foresight. What can we do so that the 4th revolution doesn't turn out the way as the first 3 did?
Yeah, you said the word Luddite. Of course I didn't. It's important. But, there's always people who get hurt. There's a tendency to identify with them and say, well, we got your back. We're going to protect. We're going to delay it. Or we're going to find ways to buffer it or whatever. And the lesson from history is that this is like a tectonic shift under the Earth's crust. It's completely inevitable. There's no resistance is futile.
You can't command the tides, too.
That's correct. And so, like they say in Star Trek, resistance is futile, so it is going to happen. And so if it's going to happen, then why would you be resisting it? Why not instead embrace it and then work on ways to adapt through it to speed up that adjustment process? If people are going to get displaced or disrupted, let's say, and have to relearn so they can continue to make value added to their company, well, you find ways to facilitate it. And so in that context that I've just described, that initiative to create 100,000 new tradespeople, well, that's exactly the right kind of thing, because what we know from the other 3 industrial revolutions is that like the people who invented the iPad must have made a boatload of money, right? Well, they didn't spend the money on iPads. They spent the money on everything.
Yes.
So the big missing part of this is people focus on who's going to lose their job and how long am I going to be displaced? What am I going to do next? When jobs are being created by that wealth surge everywhere. So in the 3rd industrial revolution, there was a 15% gain in output, in income per person over a 10-year period. That's massive. What if you resisted that and you took your time about it and you only got 5? Oh, I just described Canada.
Yeah.
Okay? So if instead you say, well, I know it's coming, it's inevitable, so I'm going to do whatever I can to make it happen faster and more effectively, I think that's what we should be doing. So that would mean policies that supercharge business investment, not just a level playing field or whatever, but make sure, everybody's can't wait to get her done. and put the complementary policies in place like that initiative on the trades, but more of those kinds of things so that people have many pathways, to go. And the last thing I want to mention is sort of a good news part of this. I know sometimes some of it sounds scary. But one of the bits of good news is this is the first industrial revolution that will happen while the workforce is actually shrinking because of people like me, the baby boomers, okay? So I think companies will have a very strong incentive to try to find a way for their people to gravitate. If half their job is gone, well, let's build the other half again. Let's find the value-added spot for you. If you need some training in that, I've got your back, because you're not going to be able to just go out in the street and get, cut 10% of your staff and then think, oh, but now I need all these people to do this, that, and the other thing. They're not going to be there, okay? So it's best to train in-house, and you'll build loyalty for life with those people. So I think that's kind of maybe the silver lining in all this. We're at a time when the adjustment will be different. But policy should be like that, and the tax system should be just big bang, fix it. We reward companies that are small for staying small instead of
Small business tax rate, out the door.
yeah, get rid of that. That's just ridiculous. Okay, so let's treat young companies especially so that they become bigger companies, as opposed to cementing small companies below 500K in revenue. Because the tax rate will go
I
up.
want to ask you more about tax and fiscal policy in just
Yeah,
a second, but
yeah.
you made a point I think that's crucial, which is unlike the earlier industrial revolutions, we're not going to maybe make things better for someone's kids or their grandkids, but we can make it better for them. The adjustments could happen for people that are being displaced right now. That's a great point.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And imagine if your societal wealth could be boosted by 15 or 20%. That's your kids, right?
For sure.
And your grandchildren. So, but if you say, well, we're going to slow it down, and like we basically went through a time when there were, for many reasons, we underinvested. I don't need to say, everybody knows those reasons. Okay, I relate them mostly to the first term of Donald Trump when he said, "I'm going to rip up NAFTA." First thing I do. Well, a lot of people rely on NAFTA. So they were like, I'm not going to invest right now. I got to see how that turns out. Well, it took 4 years for it to turn out, and then not much happened under Biden, and here we go again, right? So you kind of have this pall of uncertainty that's held back investment. Well, we somehow have to overcome that uncertainty in other ways, either fix it, if we can do that, but otherwise find ways to incentivize or supercharge business investment, because that'll be our growth platform.
You talked about the Big Bang.
Yeah.
What else is in that sort of explosion of policy other than the small business tax rate?
Yeah, I mentioned small business, but I think it goes back to personal taxation, right? Because you can't do any of this without attracting the right people, and that goes to immigration policy, of course. We're not producing even a replacement workforce domestically now, so if we want to grow a baseline of 1% labor force plus 1 to 2% productivity to give us a 3% growth track in the economy, well, the foundation would be immigration of at least 1% per year. And using our universities and colleges, that's by far our strongest channel to get people to stay here for 4 years and see if they like it or not, and then they're all trained already. It's fantastic. So we've stymied that as an important channel, and we've kind of cut that off because it affects the housing market. Like, my goodness, there's other ways of dealing with the housing market, like build student housing. Not that hard. It's relatively inexpensive. Well, anyway, I'm just saying there are some easy solutions in here that we have kind of left undone. But so income taxes, of course, are, they're atrocious. Okay.
Canada gets much more of its income from income taxes than consumption taxes.
Instead of consumption taxes, okay? So, there are things we could do there right away. And why I said Big Bang is because you can't propose any one of these things.
Why?
Well, if you said, oh, let's increase the GST.
Very popular move in Alberta, I bet.
Yeah, that's a great example. So let's just say, let's increase the GST while you get slaughtered,
Yeah.
right? What you have to do is 35 years ago in New Zealand, they said, we don't have a GST, so we're going to have a 10% GST. And everybody's like going nutfire. Like, what? And they said, yeah, but we're going to cut the income tax by 10% the same day. And he goes, oh, all right then.
Yeah.
Well, why can't we do that's even a little bang.
Yeah.
Okay, but here in Canada, what do? We split it in two parts. We did a tax reform, get out the goodies, and then Mulroney brings in the GST afterwards, and they got slaughtered for it, right? And so, there's lessons are around. The big bang means, substituting taxes that are more efficient. And, one of the things we also do is we tell people, you start paying taxes when you make a relatively low amount of money. But actually, you don't, because in return, you get your GST credit, sure, and you get your family benefit and this sort of thing. So when you do all the math, it turns out you actually make quite a bit of money before you pay any taxes.
About how much would you sell?
60 something.
Okay.
Something like that. And so I don't know the exact number, but the OECD does these calculations to compare across countries, and I've looked up lately. But the point is, it's something like that. So why wouldn't we just have zero taxes up till there? But instead, we have all these multiple programs, and people think, well, I'm entitled to my family benefit. I'm entitled to that. But I also have to pay taxes even on my first paycheck. So we could simplify everything in this big bang, and we would also be transparent about it. And by the way, all those programs cost money to deliver. So if it costs you $1 to deliver $1 or $2, that's a waste of money, right?
Sure.
Yeah. And so why don't we just simplify it all one night, midnight?
Yeah.
And actually, it's best if you don't tell anybody, right? You just say, okay, the old days, the budget was like that.
Yes.
You say we're not telling you what's not saying a word, and then the next day at 4:00, boom, big bang.
You took away your phones for me.
Those were the days. Now they tell everything in advance.
Yeah.
But anyway, you do all that stuff, people, and you say, here's the math. You're better off, you're better off. Oh, look at that. Everybody's better off. Wow, that's a day.
So Canada builds a brand as a low tax country.
Yes, and where business can grow and not incur a much higher tax rate just because it had the nerve to grow.
And that would sell well in Alberta.
It would sell in Alberta, and we can use flow through shares more often. There's all kinds of things you could build into that big bang. And what you do is you promise people we're going to cook it all up, and no one's going to be worse off, and everybody's going to be at least as well off as today, right? Here's your arithmetic. Here's your arithmetic. Here's your arithmetic. You lay it all out there, and people are like, okay, I'm fine. I got more money in my pocket, but I have to pay the GST now. Yeah, it works out.
This sounds so fantastic. Why don't we do it today?
Well, I'm not in charge, eh?
No.
But seriously, I'm going to say, look, it obviously requires politics to implement something like this. And politics, believe it or not, is the hardest job on earth. I've been up close to it. I can see that. And if you haven't been in a Twitter storm, you haven't lived. You haven't earned your stripes yet. Yeah. And it always sounds like, even though if you go down into the deep well and read all of it, you realize there's only a couple hundred people. But it sounds like there's millions of people, right? But it doesn't matter. You can't help but be judged every minute of every day as a politician. It's not like you don't wait till report card day. You're judged every day, and it's terrible. That's life, right? It's our job. So politics then is the art of the possible, and you're always trying to do good work and build a consensus around it. It's very hard to build consensus, and what I'm arguing is this industrial revolution will make it even harder to build consensus. Sometimes even harder for governments to reach those kinds of joint decisions. So we're in for more volatility on that front. And so we need to have, sort of a bold move. And as I said, if it's a package, then you don't even get the economists disagreeing, right? Because right now, if you say, let's increase the GST, okay, there's for sure an economist in here that'll say, oh, that's bad for people that have to spend their entire paycheck.
Very regressive. Yeah.
It's regressive. Well, no, it isn't. We give them a GST rebate. Wait a minute, how is it regressive? We give the money back. Oh, I'm entitled to that.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, that's how it's confusing. So this is all fixable, but politics is going to have a really hard time fixing it. So I'm a little worried that we won't be able to. So that's all. I just hope if we can explain it better, maybe we can build a consensus. Like, if everybody here voted right now, would you vote for my Big Bang?
Show of hands. Big Bang?
Yeah. That's what we need. I know, and so I think it's not impossible. And when there's kind of a crisis atmosphere, maybe that's good timing.
You anticipate my next question.
Oh, yeah?
Which is,
Oh.
I've been speaking with a few people who said, that the mood has shifted over the last 15 months. Mr. Trump's threats
Yes.
have created. I'm wondering, what's your sense of both the sense of urgency and maybe even, not to give Mr. Trump credit for something inadvertently may have done, but perhaps a clarifying moment in Canada?
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I've always believed that if we had a crisis of sorts and you were in the room and, the deciders were in the room, and you say, well, look, let's just keep those doors closed and let's not go out till we've got something to deliver, that it would happen. I've been disappointed multiple times on that. I'm the biggest proponent about reducing the barriers for commerce between provinces, right? Interprovincial barriers, as we call them, or regulatory differences, et cetera. Why can't we fix that? And, we got a bit of momentum on that just in this.
Yes, some.
Exactly like when Canada was created. It was created in response to the threat from the United States, right? They abrogated our free trade agreement then. In the 1860s. So, Canada was created to create a single common market. And
Maybe you call it a country.
Might, but that's a political concept. But it was a common market so that we wouldn't have to rely as much on the United States. And how did we get here? Well, it's a natural process. You regulate things as a province. Well, if something happens, you change the regs. You're moving along and somebody else changes their regs, pretty soon they diverge. All right? Well, that's just natural, but we can't sit down and say there are 8 different specifications for home furnaces in Canada. Why couldn't there just be one? Imagine if you're a guy that makes furnaces, right? So that kind of thing has all kinds of money. I'm worried about the trade policies, the rupture that we're living in. And the best estimates I've seen is that if all that happens is there's a 10% minimum tariff on everything that goes into the United States, the world will lose 2% of its income and half a point per year from then on, which doesn't sound like a great deal, but after 10 years, it's something like $40 trillion.
That's real money.
That's real money. Well, so can we avoid that? Well, yeah, or can we replace it? Well, one of the ways we could replace it was having a better common market, which is arguably 5, 6, or even 7% of our income that's just wasted every day. So
I'm going to note that 2% and 6%, that's more than what we'd be getting.
So why can't you get the premiers or let's say the finance ministers, to be fair, in a room and say, let's not go out until we can all say, we can give everybody a 5% tax cut and it won't cost us a cent because we're getting rid of all these rules. And that would be an amazing announceable, right? But we can't do it yet. So the crisis should be able to produce that kind of behavior. And I still am hopeful. I'm more hopeful today than I was before all this happened. But we cannot waste this crisis. That's right.
And I wanted to end up on wondering what's the upside and downside risk if we get this wrong on our 4th industrial revolution. What's the downside risk?
Oh.
And then, next question, what's the upside opportunity?
Well, so the downside risk is that our competitiveness, and we will and always will be a trading nation. Our competitiveness has seriously deteriorated over this past 10 to 15 years. Our ability to compete on the market is not anything like what it could be. And so if we allow that to deteriorate further, fall behind again, by even more. Then think of the world, all the economies as a flock of Canada geese, right? You know, do you ever notice how they do that V thing?
Couple of times.
Couple of times. You know where they learn that?
Bank of Canada.
No. No, it's you know, it's an army thing.
Yes.
No, but seriously, it's just a natural place to fly in behind the goose in front, because it's like when, you know, bicyclists follow each other close, right? Breaking the wind. And the lead goose happens to be an American. Okay? It's still a Canada goose, though. It's just not a Canadian Canada goose. It's an American Canada goose. Yeah, you can tell by the accent. So anyway, they're breaking the wind and the technological leader. And we have progressively been falling behind in that flock of geese, okay? And so we need to do a lot right now to get some catching up. And that is what that indicator will be, the living standards of our kids and grandchildren. And so we have a tremendous opportunity. So you ask, what is the upside? The downside is we fall back some more.
Sure.
The upside is we embrace it fast. We grab this technology and we go with it. We take care of the folks who get damaged and get them into a value producing stream, and everybody's over. In 4 years, we're back on track, and we've got a new growth platform, and we're back close to the lead, maybe even a leader. That's an amazing upside. And that accumulates, okay? And so that cost of the rupture will disappear in the rearview mirror if we do that.
And one last question. I'd be remiss with a former central banker on stage to not ask, any interest in politics?
Any what?
Any interest in politics?
Oh, my God. Of course. Thought about that a lot. But I thought about it enough to know no. But you know, I always thought it'd be great to be the boss for a couple of weeks, straighten all these things out. And I know my good friend Mark is having a hoot doing that. And yet you can tell it's really hard. Yeah. So no, and you know, he's got 10 years on me. So let's watch. I think, you know, I'm feeling optimistic that some of these things are going to occur. Certainly that we'll be seen as a stronger investment destination, you know, as we get our act together, that we prove that we can walk and chew gum at the same time. That is to say, green is fine, we can do that, but we can also do conventional energy. We can do it all of the above. Of course we can. And so all we got to do is find that right spot and make sure that we don't spend years debating it, you know, or holding it up, that we get everybody at the table that's implicated, and we find our consensus. It'll be good.
Ambition and action, those are two words that are very much at home in Alberta. So.
Yes, I know they are. It's a great place. You never have to persuade me to come here. I'll tell you what, I'll like you there.
Well, I just wanted to thank Stephen Politz for joining us. If everyone was joining me.
Thanks, Ella. Thanks very much for the time.
So thanks, everyone. And I just wanted to then bring to the podium Jessica Tan, Executive Vice President and President of Sun Life Canada, who will be here to make a few remarks. Thanks a lot.
I know I'm standing between you, the cocktail reception. So hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Tan. First, thank you, Globe and Mail, for organizing this. So it's interesting for me because I'm a new Canadian. I've only been here for 1.5 years. I spent 25 years of my professional career in US and Asia. I come from a very small country called Singapore, which is, I checked, I Googled, the island is smaller, our country is smaller than Calgary, just a little bit smaller. We have about the same number of people, which is 5 million people. But one thing that I'm really proud of, and I think that's what the excitement today I can feel in Calgary and in this forum, is that I'm proud that we're a country that was kicked out by our neighbor Malaysia 60 years ago from nothing. I remember growing up then. I checked out GDP per capita just in about 10 plus years ago. So we're about 55,000 US dollars, and we are 100,000 US dollars today. We are a country of nothing for a lot of you, we have no resources. We're nothing, which is a bunch of hardworking people. And it's a miracle that I think I'm proud of the country that we've grown at this. And this comes back to then me as a new Canadian, and I'm privileged to lead Sun Life Canada, a company that hopefully serves many of your employees. We serve 1 in 3 working Canadians across health, protection, and wealth asset management. And I think today was very exciting for me. And I hope that, I think all the panels here, to me, take away, I won't attempt to summarize everything because I'm constantly Googling all the nuances. I think one, I hear loud and clear, the bold aspiration and the opportunities ahead, not just for Canada, but for Alberta. You have me convinced. I mean, you have my vote. 2, there's a lot of nuances, a lot of things we gotta solve. And lots of it I don't even profess to understand. A lot of history and nuances, but I think I hear loud and clear. I think several of the speakers today, John and others, said that basically we've done this before. Right, we've built and we've done this before, and we can solve all these problems if we have a shared dialogue. And today, thank you, Globe and Mail, when David opened up to say that we bring the business community together so that we can, I think, the beginning of a fantastic, candid dialogue, one that's very energizing. So I personally am very excited about the future that I think Canada can build, that Albertans can build together, and we are very proud to be part of it. And thank you very much. I look forward to getting to know everyone much better. Thanks.
Wow, the walk-on songs change. Just to close up, thank you all very much for the participation and your interest and the frank talking that we have had from all of the panelists and the participants today. There's a lot of homework to be done. There's a lot of good, honest reflection and serious participation around regulations and around the business climate and the political challenges. Governor Pelosi, I think, put it very well with respect to the whole challenges of getting people into a room and getting stuff done. We're undergoing a series looking at tax reform, which we'll be launching in September, because it's a generational need and the Globe needs to bring some pressure to bear and some scrutiny on that issue. So I was listening very closely to what you said, Governor Pelosi, and I thought it was excellent. The separatism issue came up, of course, almost amusingly, but of course it's very serious. And I don't know if you've noticed today, but with newspapers, we never stand still. There was a court decision made this afternoon where the referendum question was ruled out of order, was squashed by Justice Leonard at the Court of King's Bench. And so there is further confusion this afternoon with respect to that issue, specifically because First Nations were not considered. And I think First Nations and the voices we heard from the stage are central to where we move from here. And that question of equity that Joe referenced was something that we all take back with us. You will find a QR code where you can fill in a survey. Please help us to improve. This is part of a long-running national series. We moved to Halifax in June and then to Vancouver at the end of June. We'll be back again in the fall in different places and into the spring of next year as well. And all of you who have registered, you'll get a link to the proceedings of today in about a week's time, so you can take a look at the various elements and hover over the specifics. But for now, it is my opportunity to close the session, to thank you all again, and to welcome those of you in the room to a reception and to continue networking and having good conversations. Thank you all so very much. Thank you.